The ballroom went silent the moment they saw her. Not because Clara Bennett wore diamonds or carried herself like royalty, but because she didn't. She stood next to Damien Ashford, one of Manhattan's most powerful billionaires, in borrowed elegance, while his ex-fiancée's wedding glittered around them like a calculated insult. Every eye in the room recognized the maid. Every whisper cut like glass. Vivian Sterling's smile was poison wrapped in silk. This wasn't a wedding. This was a battlefield. And Clara, the poor young woman from nowhere, had just walked into a war she never asked to fight. If you want to see how a room full of elites learns that power isn't about money, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. 3 days before Vivian Sterling's wedding, Damien Ashford sat alone in his library with a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched, and an invitation he should have burned. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive, embossed with gold lettering that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Inside, the words were simple, elegant, and deliberately cruel. You are cordially invited to witness the marriage of Vivian Sterling and Marcus Hale. Witness, not celebrate, not join in happiness. Witness. Damien's jaw tightened as he stared at the card. Vivian knew exactly what she was doing. She always did. Mr. Ashford? The voice was quiet, almost apologetic. Damien looked up to find Clara Bennett standing in the doorway, holding a tray with fresh coffee he hadn't asked for but somehow needed. She wore the same plain gray dress she always wore, her dark hair pulled back in a simple knot, her expression carefully neutral. Clara. He set the invitation down. You don't need to keep checking on me. I know. She stepped inside, setting the tray on the side table. But Mrs. Chen said you skipped lunch, and you have the Parker meeting in an hour. Damien almost smiled. Clara never pushed, never pried, but she noticed everything. In the 8 months she'd worked in his household, she'd become the only person who could be in the same room with him without wanting something. I'll eat later. Clara nodded, turning to leave, but her eyes caught the invitation on his desk. Just for a second. Then she looked away like she'd seen something private she had no right to. You can ask, Damien said. She paused. It's not my business. That's never stopped anyone else in this house. Clara turned back, her expression uncertain. She had a face people underestimated. Soft features, warm brown eyes, the kind of quiet prettiness that didn't demand attention. But there was something steady in the way she held herself, something that didn't bend. Is it someone important? She asked carefully. My ex-fiancée. The words came out flat. She's getting married this weekend. Clara's eyes widened slightly. Oh, yeah. Damien picked up the whiskey glass, reconsidered, set it back down. And she invited me to watch. That's... Clara hesitated. That's cruel. That's Vivian. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, Manhattan stretched gray and cold under March clouds. Somewhere in this city, Vivian Sterling was probably choosing flowers or approving seating charts, orchestrating every detail of a wedding designed to prove she'd won. Are you going? Clara asked. I haven't decided. That was a lie. He'd decided the moment he opened the invitation. He was going because not going would be admitting defeat. He was going because Vivian expected him to show up alone, maybe bitter, definitely diminished. She wanted to parade her happiness in front of him like a trophy. What she didn't expect was for him to play back. Damien looked at Clara, really looked at her. She was watching him with quiet concern, not the calculated sympathy he got from his business associates or the predatory interest he saw at charity galas, just genuine, uncomplicated kindness. An idea formed, reckless, possibly insane. What are you doing Saturday night? He asked. Clara blinked. Laundry, probably. Why? I need a date for the wedding. The silence that followed was profound. Clara stared at him like he'd started speaking another language. I'm sorry, what? A date. Someone to go with me to Vivian's wedding. Damien stood pacing to the window. Everyone there will expect me to show up alone. Wounded pride, unfinished business, all that dramatic nonsense. I'd rather surprise them. Mr. Ashford. Damien. Mr. Ashford, Clara repeated firmly. I'm your housekeeper. I'm aware. I clean your kitchen and organize your daughter's playroom. And you do both excellently. Claire's expression shifted from shock to something closer to panic. You can't be serious. You're one of the richest men in New York. You could bring anyone to that wedding. Models, actresses, literally anyone who belongs at something like that. I don't want someone who belongs, Damien said quietly. I want someone real. I'm real, Clara said, her voice rising slightly. And I'm also completely wrong for this. Those people will eat me alive. Let them try. Clara shook her head, backing toward the door. This is insane. You're asking me to walk into a room full of millionaires and pretend I'm one of them when I can barely make rent on my studio apartment. Do you have any idea how humiliating that would be? For you or for them? The question stopped her. Damien crossed the room, closing the distance between them but keeping it professional. Clara, I'm not asking you to pretend to be something you're not. I'm asking you to stand next to me for one evening while a group of shallow, status-obsessed people remember that their opinions don't matter. They'll whisper, they'll judge. They already do that to everyone. At least you don't deserve it. Clara's hands twisted together, a nervous gesture he'd noticed she made when stressed. Why me? Really? Damien considered lying, dressing it up in strategy or convenience. But Clara had a way of seeing through that kind of thing. Because you're the only person in my life who doesn't want anything from me, he said. You show up, do your job, take care of my daughter when she's here, and you never once ask for more. Everyone else in my world is calculating angles, making plays, measuring what they can extract. You just exist, honestly, and that's rarer than you know. Claire's expression softened, but the fear didn't leave her eyes. I don't have anything to wear to something like that. That's not a problem. I don't know how to talk to those people. Neither do I, half the time. Damien, she caught herself, surprised by the informality. Mr. Ashford, this is a terrible idea. Probably. I'll embarrass you. Impossible. Clara looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for something, reassurance maybe, or a sign that this was all an elaborate joke. When she didn't find it, she sighed. If I say yes, and I'm not saying yes, what exactly would this involve? A dress? A car? A few hours at an overpriced venue watching people congratulate themselves on their wealth? Damien's mouth curved slightly. And maybe, if we're lucky, we'll remind Vivian Sterling that she's not the center of the universe. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Claire asked quietly. You want to make a point. I want to close a chapter. There's a difference. Clara studied him, and Damien found himself hoping she'd see what he needed her to see, that this wasn't about revenge or games, but about finally stepping out from under the shadow of a relationship that had nearly destroyed him. Vivian had left him 18 months ago, right after his daughter Emma was born, because being a billionaire's wife was one thing, but being a billionaire's wife with actual responsibilities was another. She'd walked away from both of them without looking back, and now she wanted him to watch her celebrate moving on. He was done giving Vivian Sterling what she wanted. One evening, Clara said finally. That's all. That's all. And you'll handle everything. The dress, the logistics, whatever else. Already planned. Clara took a shaky breath. This is the stupidest thing I've ever agreed to. Noted. She turned to leave, got halfway to the door, then stopped. Why do I feel like I just signed up for something that's going to change everything? Damien didn't answer because he didn't know how to tell her she was absolutely right. The next morning, Clara arrived at work to find a woman waiting in the foyer. She was tall, elegant, somewhere in her 50s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that assessed Clara in 3 seconds flat. She wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Clara's entire wardrobe. Clara Bennett? The woman asked. Yes. Margot Price. Mr. Ashford hired me to prepare you for Saturday. She looked Clara up and down with professional detachment. We have 48 hours. Let's not waste them. Clara's stomach dropped. Prepare me for what exactly? Everything. Margot gestured to the sitting room. Hair, makeup, posture, conversation. You'll need to know who's who, what not to say, how to handle difficult questions. She paused. And we need to find you a dress that won't make you feel like you're playing dress up. Great, Clara muttered. No pressure. Over the next 2 days, Clara learned more about Manhattan's elite social circles than she ever wanted to know. Margot was ruthlessly efficient, drilling her on names, families, business connections, all the invisible hierarchies that governed these people's lives. Vivian Sterling, Margot said during one session, Comes from old banking money. Her father is Gerald Sterling, sits on half the boards in the city. Her mother was a Huntington, Connecticut Huntingtons, not the California ones. Important distinction. Why? Clara asked. Because these people think it matters. Margot flipped through photos on her tablet. Vivian broke off her engagement to Damien about a year and a half ago. Officially, they cited incompatible life goals. Unofficially, she didn't want to be a mother. Clara remembered Emma, Damien's 3-year-old daughter. She was a quiet child, serious for her age, with her father's dark eyes and a tendency to watch people carefully before deciding if they were safe. That's horrible, Clara said. That's privilege, Margot corrected. Vivian Sterling has never had to choose between what she wants and what's expected of her, because she was raised to want exactly what's expected. When that changed, she left. And now she's marrying someone else. Marcus Hale, venture capitalist, family money from pharmaceuticals. Absolutely perfect on paper. Margot's tone suggested she didn't think much of perfection. The wedding is at the Whitmore estate. 400 guests, probably $250,000 in flowers alone, and every important person in New York society watching. And they're going to be watching me, Clara said quietly. Yes, because I don't belong there. Margot set down her tablet, meeting Clara's eyes directly. You belong anywhere you choose to stand. The trick is convincing yourself of that before you walk in the door. The dress arrived Friday afternoon. Clara stood in her small studio apartment, staring at the garment bag hanging on her closet door like it might explode. She'd told Margot her size, her coloring, her budget concerns, which Margot had immediately dismissed, and now here it was. The physical evidence that tomorrow night was actually happening. She unzipped the bag slowly. The dress was midnight blue, simple in cut but devastating in execution. It had a fitted bodice and a skirt that would fall to her ankles, elegant without being fussy. The fabric was silk, cool under her fingers, catching light like water. There was a note pinned to the hanger in handwriting she didn't recognize. Not armor, just a reminder that you're already enough. Clara's throat tightened. She'd spent her entire life being invisible. The scholarship kid in private school, the waitress serving tables while her classmates partied, the housekeeper in other people's homes. Being seen, really seen, terrified her almost as much as the wedding itself. Her phone buzzed. A message from Damien. Car picks you up at 5 tomorrow. If you're having second thoughts, now's the time. Clara stared at the message. She could back out. Text him right now, apologize, return the dress, and go back to being invisible. Instead, she typed, I'll be ready. The lie felt necessary. Saturday arrived with brutal clarity. Clara spent the morning in a daze, going through motions. Margot had arranged for hair and makeup to come to her apartment, another surreal detail in a week full of them. The stylists arrived at noon, transforming her tiny space into an impromptu salon. You have excellent bone structure, Titas, the makeup artist said, studying Clara's face. We're going to keep this natural. You don't need much. Clara watched in the mirror as her features were enhanced rather than hidden. Her eyes looked larger, darker. Her skin glowed. Her hair was styled in loose waves that fell past her shoulders, elegant but not overdone. When they finished, she looked like herself. Just more. The dress fit perfectly. The heels Margot had chosen were higher than Clara usually wore, but manageable. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, the only full-length reflective surface in the apartment, and barely recognized the woman staring back. You look beautiful, the makeup artist said. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. At exactly 5 o'clock, her phone buzzed. The car was downstairs. Clara grabbed the small clutch Margot had provided, containing exactly 3 things: lipstick, her ID, and a tissue, and headed down. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was trying to escape through her ribs. The car was a sleek black sedan, the kind with tinted windows and a driver who opened the door without making eye contact. Clara slid into the back seat and found Damien waiting. He looked devastating in a tailored tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression unreadable. But when he saw her, something shifted in his eyes. Clara. Too much? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. No. His voice was rough. You're perfect. The car pulled into traffic, heading toward the Whitmore estate in Connecticut. They had an hour's drive ahead of them. An hour for Clara to spiral into panic or back out entirely. Damien seemed to sense this. You can still change your mind. Can you? He considered the question. No. Then neither can I. They drove in silence for a while, Manhattan giving way to suburbs, then to the manicured countryside of Connecticut's wealthiest enclaves. Clara watched the landscape change through the tinted window, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Tell me about her, she said finally. Vivian? Damien's jaw tightened. Why? Because I need to know what I'm walking into. He was quiet for so long, Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, we met at a charity gala 6 years ago. She was everything I thought I wanted, beautiful, poised, from the right family. We got engaged after 2 years. It seemed inevitable. What changed? Emma. Damien's voice softened when he said his daughter's name. I wasn't planning to be a father. Vivian made that very clear from the beginning. She didn't want children, I agreed. But then Emma happened anyway. Unplanned, unexpected. And suddenly I had to choose between the life I'd built and the daughter I hadn't known I needed. You chose Emma. Vivian chose herself. There was no bitterness in his voice, just fact. She left before Emma was even born, signed away her rights, took a generous settlement, and moved on. I can't even blame her for being honest about what she wanted. But you can blame her for this, Clara said, gesturing vaguely at the evening ahead. Damien's smile was sharp. Yes. This is cruelty disguised as civility. She knows exactly what she's doing. And what are we doing? He looked at her then, really looked at her, showing her that her opinion stopped mattering the day she walked away. The Whitmore estate appeared like something from a dream, or a nightmare, depending on perspective. The main house was a sprawling Georgian mansion, all white columns and perfectly manicured gardens despite the March chill. The driveway was lined with luxury cars, and guests in formal wear drifted toward the entrance like beautiful, expensive ghosts. Clara's stomach twisted. Oh, God. Breathe, Damien said quietly. I'm trying. The car stopped. The driver opened Damien's door first, then circled to Clara's side. She stepped out onto gravel that probably cost more per square foot than her apartment, and suddenly she was there. Standing at the entrance to a world that would never be hers, wearing borrowed elegance and borrowed confidence. Damien appeared at her side, offering his arm. Ready? Clara looked up at the mansion, at the guests already starting to notice their arrival, at the life she'd agreed to walk into for one evening. No, she said honestly. Good. Neither am I. They walked forward together. The moment they stepped through the entrance, Clara felt it. The shift in atmosphere as heads turned, conversations paused, eyes tracked their movement across the foyer. The assessment was instant and brutal. She could practically hear the thoughts. Who is she? Where did she come from? What is Damien Ashford doing with her? A server appeared with champagne. Damien took 2 glasses, handing one to Clara. Her hand trembled slightly as she accepted it. Smile, he murmured. You're doing fine. Clara forced her mouth into something resembling a smile and immediately wanted to disappear. This was a mistake. Everything about this was a mistake. Then she heard a voice like poisoned honey. Damien, you came. Vivian Sterling glided toward them in a wedding gown that probably cost more than Clara made in a year. She was breathtaking, blonde hair swept up in an intricate style, blue eyes bright with triumph, her smile sharp enough to cut. Vivian, Damien's voice was perfectly neutral. Congratulations. Thank you. Vivian's eyes slid to Clara, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. And who is this? Clara opened her mouth, but Damien spoke first. This is Clara Bennett, he said calmly. Clara, Vivian Sterling. Soon to be Vivian Hale, Vivian corrected, her smile widening. It's lovely to meet you, Clara. I don't believe we've been introduced before. The implication was clear. Clara wasn't part of their world, wasn't someone who mattered enough to know. We haven't, Clara managed. Beautiful wedding. Thank you. We spared no expense. Vivian's eyes raked over Clara's dress, her jewelry, or lack thereof, her entire presentation. The assessment took 3 seconds. The judgment was instant. That's a lovely dress. Is it vintage? Translation, cheap. Clara felt her face heat, but before she could respond, Damien's hand settled on the small of her back. The touch was light, protective. Clara has excellent taste. he said smoothly. Unlike some people who confuse expense with elegance. Vivian's smile froze. How charming. Well, do enjoy the evening. There's an open bar and the food is supposed to be exceptional. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. Though perhaps you already knew that, Clara. You work in catering, don't you? The words hit like a slap. Clara's vision narrowed. Vivian knew. Somehow she'd found out exactly who Clara was. Not just a guest, but staff. Someone who served people like her at parties just like this. No, Clara said, her voice surprisingly steady. I work in Damien's home, taking care of what matters. The distinction was subtle but devastating. Vivian's expression flickered, just for a second, before the smile returned. How domestic. She touched Damien's arm lightly. I hope you enjoy the ceremony. I'm sure it will be memorable. She swept away in a cloud of silk and satisfaction, leaving Clara and Damien standing in the wreckage of that encounter. Clara exhaled slowly. That was exactly what I expected, Damien finished. He guided her toward the ballroom, his hand still at her back. Are you all right? I think I'm going to be sick. Not yet. Wait until after the ceremony. Despite everything, Clara almost laughed. The ballroom was decorated like a winter wonderland, white flowers everywhere, crystal chandeliers throwing rainbow light across the walls, gold accents catching the glow. 400 guests filled the space, all of them wealthy, powerful, perfectly groomed. Clara had never felt more out of place in her life. They found seats near the back. Clara was grateful for the relative anonymity, but she could still feel the stares, hear the whispers. A woman 2 rows ahead actually turned around to look at her, then leaned over to whisper something to her companion. Both of them glanced back. Ignore them, Damien said quietly. Easy for you to say. You belong here. No, Damien corrected. I have money. That's not the same thing as belonging. The ceremony began before Clara could respond. Music swelled, guests stood, and Vivian made her entrance on her father's arm. She looked radiant, triumphant, every inch the perfect bride. Clara watched Damien's face for any sign of regret, pain, lingering feeling. There was nothing. He looked politely bored, like someone attending an obligation rather than witnessing the marriage of a woman he'd once planned to marry himself. The ceremony was beautiful and empty, full of traditional vows and practiced smiles. When the officiant pronounced them married and Marcus Hale kissed his new wife, the crowd erupted in applause. Clara clapped mechanically, her mind already racing ahead to the reception, to the next several hours she'd have to endure in this beautiful, hostile place. Almost done, Damien murmured, reading her thoughts. That's what people say at the dentist. This time, he did smile. The reception was worse. At least during the ceremony, everyone was focused on Vivian and Marcus. Now, with cocktails flowing and dinner being served, attention wandered, and much of it wandered toward Damien and his mysterious date. They were seated at a table with other guests, all of them wealthy, all of them comfortable in this world. Introductions were made. Names Clara immediately forgot. Polite questions that weren't polite at all. So, Clara, a woman in diamonds asked, how did you and Damien meet? Through work, Clara said carefully. Oh? What field are you in? The trap was obvious. Clara could lie, but lies had a way of unraveling. She could deflect, but that would only make them more curious. Domestic management, she said finally. The woman's eyebrows rose. How interesting. And you two are here together, Damien cut in smoothly. Tell me, Patricia, how's your husband's hedge fund performing? I heard the quarterly numbers were disappointing. Patricia's expression soured, and the conversation shifted to safer ground. But Clara felt the weight of what had just happened. These people would talk. By the end of the night, everyone would know Damien Ashford had brought his housekeeper to his ex-fiancee's wedding. The humiliation would be complete. Dinner was served, course after course of food Clara barely tasted. She smiled when appropriate, nodded in the right places, and tried to ignore the growing dread in her stomach. This night felt endless. Then Vivian appeared at their table. Damien, would you dance with me, for old time's sake? Her smile was sweet poison. Unless Clara minds. All eyes turned to Clara. The test was obvious. If she objected, she'd look jealous, possessive, exactly like the insecure outsider they already thought she was. If she agreed, she'd be left alone at a table full of strangers who'd already decided she didn't belong. Of course not, Clara said, keeping her voice light. Go ahead. Damien's eyes met hers, a question in them. She nodded slightly, and he stood, allowing Vivian to lead him to the dance floor. Clara watched them move together, Vivian's hand on Damien's shoulder, his hand at her waist. They looked perfect together, matched in height, in bearing, in the effortless grace of people born into wealth. Everything Clara wasn't. "Brave of you," Patricia said from across the table, "letting him dance with her." "Why wouldn't I?" Clara asked. "Well," Patricia's smile was sharp. "They have history, and you're new." Translation: temporary. Clara forced herself to smile. Everyone's new at some point. She excused herself before Patricia could respond, heading toward the ladies' room more to escape than from any actual need. The hallway outside the ballroom was quieter, less crowded. Clara leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. This was a mistake. All of it. She should have stayed home, stayed invisible, stayed in her lane. "You look lost." Clara turned to find a young woman watching her. Early 20s, dark hair, kind eyes. She wore a bridesmaid's dress but had the slightly harried look of someone who'd been managing logistics all night. "Just taking a breather," Clara said. "Smart. These things are exhausting." The woman extended her hand. "I'm Sophie, Vivian's cousin." Clara shook it cautiously. "Clara, I know. Everyone's talking about you." Sophie's smile was sympathetic rather than cruel. "For what it's worth, I think it's brilliant. Vivian's been insufferable about this wedding. Someone needed to remind her the world doesn't revolve around her." "I'm not trying to—" "Sure you are. And good for you." Sophie glanced back toward the ballroom. Vivian treated Damien terribly. She treated everyone terribly. The fact that he moved on, that he's here with someone who actually seems real, she shrugged. It's probably driving her crazy. Clara didn't know what to say to that. Sophie's expression turned serious. "Just be careful. Vivian doesn't like being upstaged. And tonight, whether you meant to or not, you're doing exactly that." She disappeared back into the reception, leaving Clara alone with that warning echoing in her ears. When Clara returned to the table, Damien was waiting. He stood as she approached, his expression tight. "We're leaving," he said quietly. "What? Why?" "Because I've had enough of this circus, and I'm not subjecting you to it anymore." Relief and disappointment warred in Clara's chest. "Damien, we can't just leave. Vivian will think—" "I don't care what Vivian thinks." His voice was firm. "I brought you here to prove a point, but I'm not using you as a prop for their entertainment. Come on." They were halfway to the exit when Vivian's voice rang out across the ballroom. "Leaving so soon, Damien?" The room went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned. Vivian stood in the center of the dance floor, her wedding gown gleaming under the chandeliers, her smile sharp as knives. "I had hoped you'd stay for the toast. After all, you were almost family." The emphasis on almost was deliberate. Cruel. Damien's hand found Clara's, his grip steady. "We have other plans. Congratulations again, Vivian. I hope you and Marcus are very happy." "Oh, we will be." Vivian's eyes cut to Clara. "It's funny, isn't it? How quickly people move on. Though I suppose when you lower your standards, it's easier to find someone new." The insult hung in the air, brutal and clear. Clara felt her face burn. Around them, guests shifted uncomfortably, waiting to see how this would play out. This was the moment Vivian had orchestrated from the beginning. The public humiliation, the reminder that Clara didn't belong. But before Clara could respond, before Damien could defend her, a small voice in her head, the same voice that had helped her survive every other impossible situation in her life, whispered, "Don't give her what she wants." Clara stepped forward, gently releasing Damien's hand. She looked directly at Vivian, and when she spoke, her voice was calm, clear, and completely genuine. "You're right," Clara said. "Standards do matter. I'm glad you found someone who meets yours." She turned to Damien. "Ready?" For a moment, no one moved. Then Damien's mouth curved into something close to a real smile. "Absolutely." They walked out together, leaving Vivian standing in her perfect wedding, in her perfect dress, with her perfect guests, and absolutely no response. The night air hit Clara like a blessing. She gulped it in, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and terror, and something that might have been triumph. "That was—" Damien started. "Stupid," Clara finished. "That was so stupid. I just insulted the bride at her own wedding." "You were magnificent," Clara laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. "I'm going to throw up." Please, wait until we're in the car. They made it halfway down the driveway before Clara's legs gave out. She stopped, bending over, hands on her knees, trying to remember how to breathe. Damien's hand settled on her back. Clara, I'm fine. I just need a minute. Take all the time you need. She straightened slowly, looking back at the mansion blazing with light and music and wealth. Inside, 400 people were probably discussing what had just happened, tearing apart every word, every gesture. They're going to destroy me, Clara said quietly. No. Damien's voice was absolute. They're going to try. There's a difference. The car appeared gliding up the driveway. The driver opened the door and Clara slid inside with relief so profound it nearly brought tears. Damien followed and the door closed, sealing them away from that world. As they pulled away from the Whitmore estate, Clara watched it disappear through the rear window. She'd survived. Barely, but she'd survived. Thank you, Damien said quietly. Clara turned to look at him. For what? Making a scene at your ex-fiance's wedding? For being exactly who you are. His expression was serious, open in a way she'd never seen. I brought you tonight because I thought you could handle it. I didn't realize you'd own it. I didn't own anything. I panicked and said the first thing that came to mind. And it was perfect. They drove in silence for a while, Manhattan's lights growing closer. Clara felt the adrenaline starting to fade, replaced by exhaustion so complete she could barely keep her eyes open. What happens now? She asked. Damien considered the question. Now we go home. Tomorrow, you go back to your life. And we pretend this never happened. Something in Clara's chest twisted. Of course, this was always temporary. One night, one performance, one moment of borrowed belonging. Tomorrow, she'd be back in her studio apartment, back in her gray dress, back to being invisible. Right, she said. Back to normal. But when Damien looked at her, his expression said he knew as well as she did that nothing about this was normal, and nothing would ever be the same. The car carried them back toward Manhattan, toward reality, toward whatever came next. Behind them, in a mansion full of wealth and lies, Vivian Sterling danced with her new husband and pretended she'd won. But Clara Bennett, the poor young woman who cleaned houses and worried about rent, had just learned something that money couldn't buy. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can be is exactly yourself. Even when, especially when, the whole world is watching. The car ride back to Manhattan stretched longer than Clara remembered. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the way adrenaline had drained from her system, leaving nothing but hollow fatigue. Damien sat across from her in the dim interior, his face half-shadowed, staring out at the highway lights sliding past like distant stars. Clara's phone buzzed. Then again. And again. She pulled it from her clutch, the screen lighting up with notifications. Text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. 3 missed calls. A voicemail notification. Her stomach turned. Don't, Damien said quietly. Don't what? Read whatever they're sending you. His eyes met hers in the darkness. It won't help. But Clara's thumb was already moving, opening the first message. It was from Rachel, another housekeeper she'd worked with at a previous job. The text was short. OMG, is that you? Someone posted video from the Sterling wedding. Clara's vision blurred. Oh no. Clara. She opened Instagram with shaking hands. The first thing she saw was a video clip, grainy but clear enough. It showed her and Damien walking out of the Whitmore estate, showed Vivian standing in the ballroom behind them, her face frozen in shock. The caption read, "Billionaire brings housekeeper to ex's wedding." Vivian Sterling's face says it all. The video had 40,000 views, posted 20 minutes ago. They know, Clara whispered. Everyone knows. Damien leaned forward, taking the phone gently from her hands. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening, then powered it off completely. Hey, trust me, he said. Whatever's happening online right now will only make it worse. Let it burn itself out. Burn itself out? Clara's voice rose. Damien, I'm a meme. I'm the punchline to some joke about... She couldn't even finish the sentence. About a woman who had more dignity in 5 minutes than most of those people have in their entire lives. Damien set her phone on the seat beside him, out of reach. Clara, listen to me. What happened tonight was inevitable the moment we walked through those doors. Vivian was always going to try to humiliate you. Those people were always going to talk. The only question was whether you'd let them define you or define yourself. I don't want to be defined at all. Clara pressed her palms against her eyes. I want to be invisible again. I want to go back to my life where nobody cared who I was or what I did. I understand that feeling. Something in his tone made her look up. Damien was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Sympathy, maybe, but also recognition. Like he knew exactly what she meant. Do you? Clara asked. Because from where I'm sitting, you chose this life. The money, the visibility, the constant judgment, I didn't choose any of it. You're right. I chose wealth, but I didn't choose the rest of it. Damien leaned back, his shoulders dropping slightly. My father built the fortune. I inherited the expectations, the scrutiny, the assumption that my entire existence should be public property. Every relationship analyzed, every decision questioned, every mistake documented for entertainment. He paused. You think I wanted that? Clara hadn't thought about it that way. She'd assumed people like Damien were immune to caring what others thought, insulated by money and privilege from the kind of shame that kept her up at night. Then why go tonight? She asked. Why subject yourself to it if you hate it so much? Because sometimes you have to walk through fire to prove it can't burn you anymore. Damien's voice was quiet but firm. Vivian spent 18 months believing she still had power over me, that I was still broken from her leaving, still diminished. Tonight, I proved otherwise. By bringing me. By bringing someone real. He met her eyes. Do you know what these people fear most? Authenticity? It exposes everything they're pretending to be. You walked into that wedding exactly as you are. No pretense, no performance, and it terrified them. Clara wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe her honesty had been strength rather than weakness, that Vivian's cruelty had backfired somehow. But the weight of those 40,000 views sat heavy in her chest. What happens Monday? Clara asked. When I have to face Mrs. Chen and the rest of the staff, and they've all seen the videos, all heard the gossip. Nothing changes. Everything changes, Clara corrected. You know it does. Damien was silent for a long moment. Then he reached across the space between them and took her hand. The gesture was simple, grounding. If anyone gives you trouble, he said, you tell me, immediately. Damien, I can't have you fighting my battles. I'm not fighting your battles. I'm taking responsibility for putting you in a situation you never asked for. His grip tightened slightly. This is on me, Clara. All of it. The car pulled up to Clara's building on the Lower East Side, a 5-story walk-up sandwiched between a bodega, and a laundromat. The contrast to the Whitmore estate couldn't have been more stark. Damien looked up at the building, then back at Clara. Do you want me to walk you up? No. Clara gathered her clutch, suddenly desperate to be alone. I just need to sleep and pretend this was all a weird dream. Clara, thank you, she interrupted. For tonight, for everything. But I need to process this by myself. She climbed out before he could respond, her heels clicking on the pavement. The night air was cold, sharp, clearing her head slightly. Behind her, she heard the car door open, heard Damien's footsteps. Wait, Clara turned. Damien stood on the sidewalk, still in his tuxedo, looking completely out of place in her neighborhood. A group of teenagers across the street stopped to stare. You were right, Damien said, about me choosing this life. But you're wrong about one thing. What's that? You think tonight was about me using you to make a point. It wasn't. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I asked you to come because being around you reminds me that there's more to life than strategy and appearances. You don't perform for anyone. You just exist, honestly, and that's become so rare in my world I almost forgot it was possible. Clara's throat tightened. Damien, I'm sorry, he continued, for putting you through this, for not protecting you better from Vivian's games, for every moment tonight that made you feel less than what you are. And what am I? The question came out smaller than Clara intended. Damien smiled, soft and genuine. Brave. Impossibly brave. He returned to the car before she could respond, sliding into the back seat. The sedan pulled away, taillights disappearing into Manhattan traffic, and Clara was left standing on her familiar street in a dress that cost more than her rent, feeling like she'd traveled between worlds and couldn't quite remember which one was real. She climbed the 5 flights to her apartment, her feet aching in the heels, her body heavy with exhaustion. Inside, the studio looked exactly as she'd left it, small, shabby, hers. Clara kicked off the shoes, unzipped the dress, and stood in her underwear staring at herself in the bathroom mirror. The makeup was smudged now. The hair was falling out of its careful style. But underneath it all, she looked like herself. Just Clara. No one special. Her phone, still in her clutch on the table, began buzzing again. Clara ignored it, climbing into bed without bothering to remove the rest of the makeup. Tomorrow would be soon enough to face whatever storm was building online. Tonight, she just needed to disappear. Sleep didn't come easy. Clara lay in the darkness, replaying the evening over and over. Vivian's smile. The whispers. Patricia's cutting questions. That moment in the ballroom when she'd looked Vivian in the eye and refused to break. Had it been brave or just stupid? Her alarm went off at 6, the same as always. Clara groaned, silencing it, then remembered with crushing clarity that she didn't have work today. It was Sunday. Damien had given her the weekend off for the wedding. The wedding that was now immortalized in countless social media posts. Clara reached for her phone against her better judgment, powering it on. The notifications flooded in immediately. Texts, Instagram tags, missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Her hands shook as she opened Instagram. The video had exploded overnight. 500,000 views now. Thousands of comments. Clara scrolled through them, unable to stop herself. Who brings their maid to a wedding, Alice and Mayo? The audacity, though. Respect. Vivian's face when they walked out. I'm screaming. This is like a Cinderella story, except Cinderella showed up in borrowed jewelry and got roasted by the entire ball. She's gorgeous, though? Like naturally gorgeous. Vivian looks plastic next to her. Y'all are missing the point. He humiliated his ex by bringing the help. That's psychotic. Clara closed the app, her stomach churning. She stumbled to the bathroom and threw up, her body finally catching up to the stress her mind had been processing all night. When she emerged, shaky and pale, there was a text from Margot. Don't read the comments. Don't respond to anyone. Keep your head down for a few days and this will pass. You did nothing wrong. Another text, this one from a number she didn't recognize. This is Sophie, Vivian's cousin. We met last night. Just wanted to say you handled that better than anyone could have expected. Vivian's having a meltdown, which means you won. Hang in there. Clara didn't feel like she'd won anything. She felt exposed, dissected, turned into content for strangers to consume and judge. Her phone rang. Damien. She answered without thinking. Hello? How are you? His voice was gentle, concerned. I'm fine. Clara. I'm not fine, she admitted. I'm a trending topic, apparently. People are calling me everything from brave to pathetic to a gold digger, and I can't stop reading the comments even though I know I should. Give me your address. What? No, Damien, it's Sunday morning. I'm sending a car. Be ready in 30 minutes. For what? Trust me. He hung up before she could argue. Clara stared at her phone in disbelief, then at her apartment, then at her reflection in the window. She looked terrible. Makeup smudged, hair destroyed, eyes red from crying and lack of sleep. 29 minutes later, she was showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater, makeup removed, looking almost human again. The buzzer rang right on time. Clara grabbed her coat and headed downstairs, half expecting paparazzi or worse. Instead, she found a different car than last night, smaller, more discreet, with a driver who handed her a coffee and a paper bag. Mr. Ashford said you probably skipped breakfast, the driver said. Inside the bag was a croissant from her favorite bakery 3 blocks away. Clara hadn't mentioned that bakery to anyone. Damien must have asked Mrs. Chen. The car drove north, out of the city, into Westchester County. Clara watched the scenery change, sipping her coffee, trying not to think about where they were going or why. When they finally pulled up to a sprawling estate hidden behind iron gates and tall trees, her stomach dropped. This is Damien's house? She asked. One of them, the driver said. The main residence. Clara had worked in Damien's Manhattan penthouse, the one he used during the week when Emma stayed with her maternal grandmother. She'd never been to the family home. Never needed to be. The car stopped in front of a modern glass and steel structure that looked like something from an architecture magazine. Before Clara could process what she was supposed to do next, the front door opened. Damien appeared, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Behind him, a small figure peeked around his legs. Emma, Damien's daughter. The 3-year-old regarded Clara with serious dark eyes, then looked up at her father. That's Clara. Yes, it is, Damien said. Clara, come inside. It's freezing out here. Clara climbed out of the car, suddenly nervous in a completely different way than she'd been at the wedding. This was Damien's private life, his daughter, his real world. She didn't belong here either. But Emma solved the problem by walking up to Clara and taking her hand. We're making pancakes, she announced. Daddy's bad at pancakes. I'm not bad at them, Damien protested. I'm still learning. Clara let Emma pull her inside, into a house that was beautiful, but actually lived in. Toys scattered across the floor, children's books stacked on tables, a jacket thrown over a chair. It looked like a home. The kitchen was enormous, all marble and stainless steel, with a mess of ingredients spread across the island. Damien had clearly attempted pancakes and failed spectacularly based on the burned ones stacked on a plate. I may have overestimated my cooking skills, he admitted. Clara couldn't help but smile. You run a billion-dollar company, but you can't make pancakes? Different skill sets. Emma tugged on Clara's hand. You make pancakes? I can try. For the next hour, Clara forgot about trending topics and viral videos and humiliation. She made pancakes with Emma, who insisted on adding chocolate chips to every single one. Damien watched from the island, drinking coffee, occasionally offering commentary that was completely unhelpful. You're supposed to flip it when bubbles form, he said at one point. Thank you, Gordon Ramsay, Clara shot back. Emma giggled. Daddy doesn't know how to cook anything except toast. Toast is a fundamental food, Damien defended himself. Toast is bread that got warm, Clara said. Exactly. Fundamental. They ate breakfast at the kitchen table, Emma chattering about her preschool and her friend Sophie, who had the same name as a princess. Clara found herself relaxing despite everything, caught up in the strange normalcy of this moment. When Emma wandered off to play, leaving them alone with dirty dishes and syrup-sticky plates, Damien finally addressed the elephant in the room. I saw the videos, he said quietly. And the comments. Clara's stomach tightened. Then you know how bad it is. I know people are talking, but Clara, they're talking about you like you're interesting, like you matter. That's not the same as what happened to me when Vivian left. What do you mean? Damien stood carrying plates to the sink. When Vivian walked away, the narrative was that I'd driven her off with my controlling nature and obsession with work, that I'd failed as a partner. The comments were pitying or mocking, but underneath it all was the assumption that I deserved it. He turned to face her. What they're saying about you is different. Some of it's cruel, yes, but a lot of it is impressed, curious, even admiring. Admiring? Clara laughed bitterly. They called me the help. Some did. Others called you brave, beautiful, real. He crossed to where she sat. The cruelest comments are from people who are threatened by you, Clara. They see someone who doesn't play their games, doesn't worship their rules, and it scares them. I don't feel scary. I feel humiliated. I know. Damien pulled out the chair next to her. And I take full responsibility for that. But I want you to understand something. What Vivian tried to do last night, publicly shame you, remind everyone you're beneath her, it backfired. You walked out of that wedding with your head up, and she's the one who looked small. Clara wanted to believe that. She wanted to feel victorious instead of violated. Sophie texted me, she said. Vivian's cousin. She said Vivian's having a meltdown. Damien's mouth curved slightly. I heard. Apparently the bride spent most of her reception on her phone, monitoring social media, trying to control the narrative, on her wedding night. That's sad. That's Vivian. He reached across the table, his hand settling over Clara's. She built her entire identity on being untouchable, superior, the object of envy. You walked into her perfect wedding and exposed how fragile that all was. Not because you tried to, but because you didn't. I just wanted to survive the night. And you did more than survive. You showed everyone in that room that their opinions don't define worth. Damien's grip tightened slightly. Including me. Clara looked at him, really looked at him. In the morning light streaming through the kitchen windows, he looked younger, less guarded, like maybe the mask he wore for the world was starting to crack. Why did you really bring me here? She asked quietly. To your home, to meet Emma. This isn't about pancakes. No, Damien admitted. It's about showing you that what happened last night doesn't change anything between us. You're still the person I trust in my home with my daughter. The internet doesn't get to decide who you are. But they're trying. They always try. The question is whether you let them succeed. Emma reappeared, dragging a stuffed elephant. Clara, do you want to see my room? Clara glanced at Damien, who nodded. Go ahead. Fair warning, it's aggressively pink. I like pink, Emma said seriously. Clara let the little girl pull her upstairs into a bedroom that was indeed very pink, with a canopy bed and shelves full of books and toys. Emma showed her everything, her favorite stuffed animals, her dress-up clothes, a drawing she'd made of what she claimed was a dinosaur, but looked more like a blob with teeth. Daddy says you're nice, Emma said suddenly. Clara sat on the floor next to her. He does? Uh-huh. He said you help take care of things. Emma arranged her stuffed animals in a careful line. Mommy didn't like taking care of things. Clara's chest tightened. Your mom loves you, Emma. She doesn't visit. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, without self-pity. Daddy says she's busy. Sometimes people are complicated. Are you complicated? Clara laughed softly. Very. That's okay. Daddy's complicated too. Emma handed Clara a stuffed rabbit. You can be the bunny. I'll be the elephant. They played for another 20 minutes before Damien appeared in the doorway, watching them with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. Emma, it's almost time for your nap, he said gently. I'm not tired, Emma protested, but her eyes were already drooping. Clara stood, brushing off her jeans. I should probably go anyway. No, Damien said quickly. I mean, if you want to stay for lunch, we could talk about what happens next. Clara hesitated. The smart thing would be to leave, to put distance between herself and this situation before it got any more complicated. But Emma was looking at her with hopeful eyes, and Damien seemed almost vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Okay, she said. Lunch. After Emma went down for her nap, Damien led Clara to a sitting room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a snow-dusted garden. The space was comfortable, lived in, with books scattered on tables and a blanket thrown over the couch. This doesn't look like a billionaire's house, Clara observed. That's because Emma lives here. She doesn't care about designer furniture or perfect aesthetics. She cares about having space to play and places to hide her stuffed animals. Damien settled into an armchair. I learned that the hard way. Spent a fortune on a professional decorator when I first bought this place. Emma cried because everything was too fancy, and she was afraid to touch anything. Clara smiled. So you started over. So I let her make it hers. Now it's chaos. But it's home. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching snow begin to fall outside. Clara felt the tension of the past 24 hours starting to ease, replaced by a strange sense of peace. I need to ask you something, Damien said finally, and I need you to be honest. Okay? Do you regret last night? Clara considered the question carefully. Did she regret becoming a viral sensation? Yes. Did she regret the cruel comments and public humiliation? Absolutely. But did she regret standing next to Damien in that ballroom, refusing to let Vivian Sterling make her feel small? No, she said quietly. I don't regret it. Even with everything that came after, even with that. Clara met his eyes. I'm scared of what Monday will bring. I'm embarrassed by the attention, but I don't regret standing my ground. Damien's expression softened. Good, because I have a proposition. Clara's stomach dropped. Oh no. Hear me out. He leaned forward. The story's out there now. Everyone knows who you are, knows you work for me, knows what happened at the wedding. We can't put that back in the box. I'm aware. So instead of hiding from it, we use it. Use it how? Vivian spent years building an image of herself as Manhattan's golden girl. Perfect, untouchable, envied by everyone. Last night you cracked that image just by being yourself. People are interested in you now, Clara. They want to know your story. Clara stood abruptly. No, absolutely not. Just listen. You want me to what? Give interviews? Tell everyone about my struggling single mother and my student loans and my studio apartment so they can feel better about their own lives? Clara's voice rose. I'm not performing my poverty for entertainment, Damien. That's not what I'm suggesting. Then what are you suggesting? Damien stood too, closing the distance between them. I'm suggesting you stop hiding. Stop apologizing for who you are and where you came from. The attention's coming whether you want it or not. You can let other people control the narrative, or you can tell your own story. I don't have a story worth telling. You have exactly the story worth telling. His voice was intense now. You're a woman who works 3 times as hard for a fraction of the reward. Who takes care of other people's children while wondering if you'll ever be able to afford your own? Who walked into a room full of millionaires and didn't blink? That's a story, Clara. It's my private story. It was. Until last night. Damien's expression turned apologetic. I know that's my fault. I know I took that privacy from you. But now that it's gone, you have a choice. Be defined by other people's assumptions or define yourself. Clara turned away, staring out at the falling snow. Everything Damien said made logical sense, but logic didn't account for how exposed she felt, how vulnerable. What if I just want to disappear? She asked quietly. Then I'll help you do that too. Damien moved to stand beside her at the window. I'll release a statement saying last night was a mistake in judgment. I'll take full responsibility, shift all the attention back to me, and you can fade into the background. Really? Really. Whatever you need, Clara. This is your decision. Clara watched the snow fall, coating the garden in white. A blank slate. She thought about her studio apartment, her overdue bills, the careful invisibility she'd cultivated her entire life. Then she thought about standing in Vivian Sterling's ballroom, looking her in the eye, refusing to be diminished. If I did this, she said slowly, if I decided to stop hiding, what would that actually look like? Damien's face brightened slightly. Controlled visibility. A single interview, maybe, with someone reputable. You tell your story on your own terms. Then you go back to your life, but on solid footing instead of defensive ground. 1 interview. 1. And I'll be there if you want me to be. Clara turned to face him. And after that? After that, people will move on to the next scandal, but they'll remember you as the woman who didn't apologize for existing. He paused. For what it's worth, that's already how I see you. Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that acknowledged what he was offering, not just a solution to the current problem, but a kind of partnership, a mutual respect. Instead, she said, Your pancakes really were terrible. Damien laughed, the tension breaking. I warned you. They spent the rest of the afternoon at the house, talking through possibilities, strategies, worst-case scenarios. When Clara finally left, the sun was setting, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hopeful. The car dropped her at her apartment building as darkness fell. Clara climbed the 5 flights, unlocked her door, and stepped into her small, familiar space. It looked the same as it had that morning, but something fundamental had shifted. She picked up her phone, opened Instagram, and for the first time since the videos started circulating, she didn't feel the urge to hide. The comments were still there, cruel and kind in equal measure, but they felt less personal now, less like verdicts and more like noise. Clara opened her messages and typed, I'm in, 1 interview, my terms. Damien's response came within seconds. I'll set it up. Thank you for trusting me. Clara set the phone down and looked around her apartment, at the peeling paint and the too small kitchen and the windows that faced a brick wall. This was her life. Not glamorous, not enviable, but real. And for the first time, she wasn't ashamed of it. Outside, Manhattan hummed with life, millions of people living their own private stories. Tomorrow, Clara would become part of the public conversation, whether she liked it or not. But tonight, she was just herself. And somehow, that felt like enough. The interview was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon at a neutral location, a private room in a boutique hotel in Midtown. Damien had arranged everything through his publicist, vetting journalists until they found someone Clara actually trusted, Michelle Park, a features writer known for nuanced profiles rather than tabloid hits. Clara spent Monday and Tuesday in a fog of preparation. Margot returned, this time focusing less on appearance and more on messaging. They sat in Clara's tiny apartment, running through potential questions, discussing boundaries, figuring out what Clara was willing to share and what remained off limits. They'll ask about your background, Margot said, making notes on her tablet. Family, education, how you ended up working for Damien. Do I have to answer all of that? You don't have to answer anything, but evasion reads as hiding something. Margot looked up. The truth is usually less interesting than what people imagine anyway. Clara thought about her mother, working double shifts as a nurse until the cancer made that impossible. Her father, who'd left when she was 6 and sent birthday cards until she turned 12. Then nothing. The scholarships that got her through college, but not the debt that came after. My life isn't a tragedy, Clara said. It's just ordinary struggle. That's exactly what makes it relatable. Margot set down her tablet. Most people aren't billionaires or socialites. They're trying to make rent and keep their heads above water. You represent them, whether you want to or not. I don't want to represent anyone. I just want to stop being a meme. Then tell your story before someone else tells it for you. On Tuesday night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed scrolling through her phone, watching the narrative shift in real time. New videos had emerged from the wedding. Someone had captured Vivian's expression when Clara and Damien left, frozen in something between rage and disbelief. That clip had gone even more viral than the original. The comments were evolving too. What started as mockery had fractured into debate. Some people called Clara opportunistic, a social climber using Damien for status. Others defended her, pointing out she'd done nothing wrong except exist in a space where people like her weren't usually welcome. A few astute observers noted that Vivian's cruelty had backfired spectacularly, turning public opinion against the bride on her own wedding day. Clara found herself reading one comment over and over. Everyone's so busy judging this woman, they're missing the point. She didn't ask to go viral. She just went to a wedding and refused to be treated like trash. That's not a crime. She screenshotted it, not sure why. Wednesday morning arrived too fast. Clara dressed carefully in clothes Margot had selected. A simple navy dress, modest heels, minimal jewelry. The goal was to look put together without appearing like she was trying too hard. She stared at herself in the bathroom mirror and saw a stranger wearing her face. The car arrived at noon. Damien had offered to ride with her, but Clara declined. She needed to do this part alone, needed to walk into that room as herself rather than as someone's plus one. The hotel was discreet, expensive in that understated way that signaled real money rather than flashy wealth. A publicist met Clara in the lobby, a woman named Andrea with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Michelle's already here," Andrea said as they walked toward the elevators. "She's good people, I promise. Just be honest. If a question makes you uncomfortable, say so. You're in control of this conversation." Clara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The room was on the 8th floor, a suite converted into a makeshift interview space. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs arranged to face each other, a camera on a tripod that made Clara's stomach drop. "You're recording this?" "Just for fact-checking," Andrea assured her. "Michelle works from notes, but the recording protects both of you. Makes sure nothing gets misquoted." Michelle Park stood when Clara entered. She was younger than Clara expected, maybe late 30s, with short black hair and an easy smile. She wore jeans and a blazer, nothing intimidating. "Clara, thank you for doing this." Michelle extended her hand. "I know this whole situation has been overwhelming. That's one word for it. I promise I'm not here to make it worse." Michelle gestured to the chairs. "Why don't we sit, get comfortable, and just talk? No agenda, no gotchas. I want to understand your side of what happened." Clara sat, her hands twisting in her lap. Andrea positioned herself off to the side, present but unobtrusive. The camera's red light blinked on. "So," Michelle began, settling into her chair with a notepad, "let's start with the obvious question everyone's asking. How did you end up at Vivian Sterling's wedding?" Clara took a breath. "Damien asked me to go with him. And you said yes." "Eventually. I said no first, actually. Several times." Michelle's eyebrows rose. "Why?" "Because I knew exactly how it would look." "I'm not stupid." Clara's voice came out sharper than intended. "I knew people would judge, would assume things, would turn it into something it wasn't." "Which was?" "A favor. Damien needed someone he could trust in a hostile environment, and apparently I was the only person who fit that description." "That's interesting phrasing, hostile environment." Michelle leaned forward slightly. "Did you know going in that Vivian had invited him specifically to humiliate him?" "I suspected. You don't invite your ex-fiancé to your wedding unless you're trying to prove something." "And what do you think she was trying to prove?" Clara considered the question. "That she'd won. That she'd moved on to something better, and Damien was still stuck in the past." "Was he? Stuck in the past?" "No." Clara's answer was immediate, certain. He was done with her long before that wedding. This was about closing a door she kept trying to wedge open. Michelle made a note. "Tell me what it was like walking into that room. The Whitmore estate, 400 guests, all of them from a world you don't typically inhabit." "Terrifying," Clara laughed without humor. "I've worked events like that before. Serving drinks, clearing plates. Being on the other side of it felt surreal. Everyone was watching, judging, calculating who I was and why I was there. How did that feel? Like being under a microscope, like every move I made would be dissected and found wanting. Clara paused. Which is exactly what happened. Actually, there's video of Vivian greeting you. She seems to recognize you immediately, knows you work for Damien. How did she find that out? I don't know, but she used it like a weapon. Clara's hands tightened in her lap. She called attention to it in front of everyone, made sure they all knew I was staff, that I didn't belong there. What did you do? I didn't apologize. Clara met Michelle's eyes. That's the thing everyone seems stuck on. They expected me to be embarrassed, to shrink away. But I wasn't embarrassed. I was angry. At Vivian? At the whole situation. At people who think where you work defines your worth as a human being. Clara's voice rose slightly. I clean houses for a living. That doesn't make me less than someone who inherited their money or married into it. But these people act like manual labor is shameful, like service is beneath them. Michelle was writing quickly now. There's a moment in one of the videos where Vivian says something about you lowering Damien's standards. You responded, but the audio's not clear. What did you say? Clara had replayed that moment in her mind 1,000 times. I said standards do matter, and I was glad she found someone who met hers. It wasn't clever. It was just honest. It shut down the entire room. It surprised people. They expected me to fight back or break down. I just refused to play the game. Michelle studied her for a moment. You've become something of an accidental spokesperson for working-class dignity. How does that sit with you? Uncomfortably. Clara shifted in her chair. I didn't ask to represent anyone. I just wanted to survive one night without losing myself in the process. But you did more than survive. You walked out of that wedding with your head up, leaving Vivian looking petty and cruel. That resonated with people. I'm glad it resonated. I'm less glad it went viral. Clara's frustration bled through. Everyone wants to turn this into some fairy tale narrative. Poor girl shows up rich people, but that's not what happened. I went to a wedding, got insulted, responded with basic human dignity, and left. That shouldn't be remarkable. But it was. Why do you think that is? Clara considered the question carefully. Because we've normalized cruelty. We've turned wealth into a virtue and struggle into a character flaw. So when someone refuses to accept that hierarchy, it feels revolutionary even though it shouldn't. Michelle smiled. That's going to make a great pull quote. They talked for another hour, covering everything from Clara's background to her relationship with Damien to what she planned to do next. Michelle asked about Emma, and Clara's expression softened immediately. She's the best part of my job, Clara said. She doesn't care about money or status. She just wants someone to play dinosaurs with her and make sure her stuffed animals are tucked in properly. Does she know about the wedding? About what happened? She knows I went to a party with her dad. That's all she needs to know. And Damien? How would you describe your relationship with him? Clara hesitated, choosing her words carefully. He's my employer, but he's also become someone I respect. He's a good father, which matters more than anything else. Are you in love with him? The question landed like a punch. Clara blinked, her mind going blank. What? It's what everyone's speculating about. The billionaire and the housekeeper, the fairy tale romance. Are you two together? No? Clara's answer was immediate, emphatic. That's not what this is about. But could it be? In the future? Michelle, Clara leaned forward. I need you to hear this clearly. Damien Ashford is my boss. He pays my salary. That's the entire extent of our relationship. Yes, I respect him. Yes, he's been kind to me through this nightmare. But I'm not auditioning to be the next Mrs. Ashford, and he's not looking for a replacement for Vivian. Then what are you looking for? The question caught Clara off guard. What was she looking for? A week ago, the answer would have been simple. Stability, rent money, invisibility. Now everything felt uncertain. I'm looking to survive this with my dignity intact, Clara said finally. I'm looking to go back to my normal life without everyone treating me like a cautionary tale or a charity case. I'm looking to be left alone. Michelle made a final note, then set down her pen. I think we have everything we need. Thank you, Clara. This was illuminating. When will it publish? Friday morning. I'll send you a draft Thursday night for fact-checking. You'll have veto power over anything you're uncomfortable with. Clara nodded, exhausted. Andrea appeared with water, with reassurances, with logistics about follow-up and damage control. Clara heard maybe half of it, her mind already spinning ahead to Friday, to the moment this interview would go live and the cycle would start all over again. She left the hotel through a side entrance to avoid photographers who'd somehow learned about the interview. The car was waiting, and Clara climbed in gratefully, desperate for the privacy of tinted windows. Her phone rang immediately. Damien. How did it go? He asked. I don't know. I think okay. Clara pressed her fingers to her temples. She asked if we're dating. A pause. What did you say? I said no, obviously. Obviously. Another pause, longer this time. Clara, are you free tonight? Why? Because I think you need a break from all of this, and I happen to know a place that serves mediocre wine and excellent pizza where no one will recognize either of us. Clara laughed despite herself. You're asking me to dinner? I'm offering moral support in the form of carbohydrates. There's a difference. Is there? Absolutely. Dinner implies romance. Pizza implies survival. Fine. Pizza. But I'm paying for my own slice. Clara, I'm serious. I'm not a charity case. I never thought you were. Damien's voice softened. I'll pick you up at 7. He hung up before she could argue further. Clara stared at her phone, trying to figure out what had just happened and why her heart was beating faster than it should be. The pizza place was in Brooklyn, tucked into a neighborhood where nobody cared about Manhattan society drama. It had checkered tablecloths and plastic chairs and slices the size of Clara's head. Damien showed up in jeans and a baseball cap, looking nothing like the billionaire from the tabloids. They grabbed a booth in the back corner. Clara ordered pepperoni. Damien got something with vegetables that made her shake her head. You're eating pizza wrong, she informed him. There's a wrong way to eat pizza? Yes, vegetables on pizza is wrong. It defeats the entire purpose. Which is? Grease and cheese and questionable life choices. Damien smiled, genuine and unguarded. Fair point. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the noise of the restaurant providing cover. Clara felt herself relaxing for the first time in days, the constant tension in her shoulders finally easing. Thank you, she said finally. For setting up the interview? For the preparation? For this? I know you didn't have to do any of it. Yes, I did. Damien set down his slice. This situation exists because I asked you to that wedding. The least I can do is help you navigate the aftermath. You're not responsible for other people being terrible. No, but I'm responsible for putting you in a position where their terribleness could reach you. He met her eyes. I meant what I said Sunday. This is on me. Clara studied him across the table. He looked tired, she realized. Not physically exhausted, but emotionally worn, like someone who'd been holding up a facade for too long and was finally letting it slip. Can I ask you something? Claire said. Always. Why did you really ask me to that wedding? And don't give me the prepared answer about trust and authenticity. What was the real reason? Damien was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture Clara recognized as his tell when he was about to say something difficult. Vivian called me 2 weeks before the wedding, he said quietly. Left a voicemail. She said she hoped I'd come, hoped I'd moved on, hoped there were no hard feelings. But underneath all that politeness was this smug certainty that I was still broken from her leaving, that I'd show up alone and diminished, proof that she'd made the right choice. And you wanted to prove her wrong. I wanted to prove to myself that she was wrong. Damien looked down at his plate. For 18 months, I told myself I was fine, that Emma and I were better off without someone who didn't want to be a parent, that Vivian leaving was a blessing, but hearing her voice, hearing that assumption that I was still damaged, he trailed off. You needed to prove you'd moved on. I needed to prove I was capable of trust again, and you were the only person who made that feel possible. Damien's eyes met hers. You showed up every day, took care of my home, played with my daughter, and never once asked for more than fair payment and basic respect. In my world, that's extraordinary. Claire's throat tightened. That's just called being a decent person. Exactly, and I'd almost forgotten what that looked like. The moment stretched between them, weighted with things neither of them seemed ready to name. Clara broke eye contact first, focusing on her pizza like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. The interview publishes Friday, she said, desperate to change the subject. Michelle seemed fair, but who knows how it'll actually turn out? It'll be fine, you were honest, which is more than most people manage in those situations. I told her we're not dating. I heard. Damien's tone was careful, neutral. She asked directly. I couldn't exactly lie. I wouldn't want you to. Clara looked up. Would you? Want me to lie, I mean. The question came out before she could stop it. Too revealing, too vulnerable. Damien's expression shifted, something complicated flickering across his features. Clara. Her phone exploded with notifications, the sudden buzzing loud enough to startle them both. Clara grabbed it, her stomach sinking as she saw the flood of messages, tags, alerts. What is it? Damien asked. Clara opened Instagram with shaking hands. The top post on her feed was a photo she hadn't seen before, her and Damien in the pizza place, right now, taken from across the restaurant. The caption read, Date night? Damien Ashford and his mystery woman spotted in Brooklyn. Romance or damage control? Posted 3 minutes ago. Already thousands of likes. We're not even safe here, Clara whispered. Damien reached across the table, taking her phone gently. He looked at the post, his jaw tightening, then powered the phone off. Come on, he said, standing. We're leaving. But we haven't finished. I don't care about the pizza. He pulled out his wallet, dropped cash on the table, way too much, and held out his hand. Trust me. Clara took his hand because she didn't know what else to do. They left through the kitchen, Damien somehow knowing exactly where the back exit was. Outside, he led her down an alley, through a series of turns that suggested he'd done this before. Where are we going? Clara asked. Somewhere they can't follow. They ended up in a small park, barely more than a playground and some benches, empty in the late evening chill. Damien finally stopped, releasing Clara's hand. I'm sorry, he said. I thought we'd be safe in Brooklyn. I didn't think... It's fine. It's not fine. You can't even eat pizza without being photographed and analyzed. Damien's frustration was evident now, the careful control slipping. This is exactly what I was trying to protect you from. You can't protect me from public interest, not when you're the one generating it. The words came out harsher than Clara intended. Damien flinched like she'd struck him. You're right, he said quietly. As long as you're associated with me, you'll be a target. The only way to make this stop is to put distance between us. Clara's chest tightened. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. This is about what's best for you. Don't do that. Clara stepped closer. Don't make decisions for me based on what you think I can handle. I'm an adult, Damien. If I wanted to walk away from this situation, I would. Then why haven't you? The question hung between them, too honest, too direct. Clara struggled to find an answer that wouldn't reveal too much, wouldn't cross lines they'd been carefully avoiding. Because, she said finally, someone has to make sure Emma's stuffed animals get tucked in properly. It was a deflection, a joke to break the tension. But Damien didn't smile. Clara, his voice was rough. I need to know if being around me, around Emma, around this whole mess, is hurting you more than helping. It's complicated. I know it's complicated. No, I mean, it's actually complicated, not rich people problems complicated, real complicated. Clara wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. A week ago, my biggest concern was making rent. Now I'm viral, being interviewed, photographed eating pizza. My entire life has been turned inside out. And the strangest part is that some of it, not the public stuff, but some of it, doesn't feel terrible. What parts? Clara hesitated. This was dangerous territory, the kind of honesty that changed things. But she was tired of being careful, tired of pretending. The parts where Emma shows me her drawings. The parts where you trust me enough to be honest instead of polished. The parts where I feel like maybe I'm not just surviving but actually living. She met his eyes. Those parts don't feel terrible at all. Damien closed the distance between them in 2 steps. For a terrifying, exhilarating moment, Clara thought he might kiss her. Instead, he took her hands in his grip warm and steady. I'm going to fix this, he said firmly. The publicity, the attention, all of it. I'll release a statement clarifying our relationship, shut down the speculation, give them something else to focus on. By next week, you'll be old news. And if I don't want to be old news? The question surprised them both. Damien stared at her, something like hope flickering in his expression. What do you want? He asked quietly. Clara didn't have an answer. She wanted impossible things: privacy and visibility, independence and connection, her old life back and this new life forward. She wanted to stop being afraid of wanting things at all. I don't know, she admitted, but I know I'm tired of running from it. Shiat. Damien's hands tightened around hers. Then we'll figure it out together. No more decisions made for you. No more protective distance. We face whatever comes next as a team. A team? If that's what you want. Clara thought about Vivian's cruelty, the viral videos, the interview waiting to publish. She thought about Emma's laughter and mediocre pizza, and the way Damien looked at her like she was worth protecting. She thought about the woman she'd been a week ago and the woman she was becoming. Yeah, she said. I want that. They stood there in the empty park, hands clasped, breath fogging in the cold air. Somewhere across the city, people were posting and commenting and speculating about their relationship. Let them. Clara was done apologizing for existing in spaces where people thought she didn't belong. The interview published Friday morning at 6 a.m. Clara woke to her phone vibrating off the nightstand, messages flooding in from numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored them all and opened the article with shaking hands. The headline read, Clara Bennett on viral fame, class warfare, and why she's done apologizing. Michelle had done good work. The piece was fair, nuanced, letting Clara's words speak for themselves without editorial judgment. There were no secret revelations, no manufactured drama, just Clara's story, told honestly. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By noon, the article had been shared 500,000 times. Think pieces sprouted across the internet. Some praising Clara's dignity, others criticizing her for seeking attention, most landing somewhere in the messy middle of human complexity. Clara's phone rang. Damien. Have you seen the reactions? He asked. Some of them. People love you. People are writing essays about class consciousness using me as an example. That's not the same as love. Close enough. She could hear the smile in his voice. How are you holding up? Ask me again in a week when I can leave my apartment without being recognized. About that, Damien paused. There's going to be a response from Vivian. Her publicist reached out to mine this morning asking for comment on the article. Clara's stomach dropped. What kind of response? I don't know yet, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. Another pause. Whatever she says, whatever narrative she tries to spin, we handle it together. Remember? Together, Clara repeated. Vivian's statement dropped at 3 p.m., released through her publicist in a carefully worded press release. Clara read it 3 times, each pass making her angrier. While I wish Clara Bennett nothing but happiness, I'm disappointed to see a private event being used for public attention. My wedding was meant to celebrate love and commitment, not become fodder for viral content. I hope everyone can respect that some moments should remain sacred and private. The subtext was clear. Clara had exploited the wedding for fame. Vivian was the victim of attention she never wanted. It was masterful manipulation, painting herself as above the fray while subtly destroying Clara's credibility. The comments on Vivian's statement were brutal. Half the internet turned on Clara immediately, calling her opportunistic, fake, a social climber who'd used Damien and the wedding for her 15 minutes. Clara sat in her apartment watching the narrative shift in real time, feeling powerless to stop it. She'd told her truth, but Vivian's version was prettier, more palatable. The wrong bride versus the calculating housekeeper. Her phone rang again. This time it was Sophie, Vivian's cousin. Don't believe a word of it, Sophie said immediately. Vivian's having a complete breakdown. She spent her honeymoon fighting with Marcus about the publicity, monitoring social media constantly. This statement is pure damage control. It's working. It won't. Not once people see what I'm about to release. Clara sat up straight. What are you releasing? A video from the wedding. Something Vivian doesn't know exists. Sophie's voice was grim. I'm her cousin, but I'm also done watching her destroy people for her own ego. This ends today. Sophie, wait. It's already uploaded. Should go live in about 10 minutes. I just wanted you to know it's coming. Sophie paused. And Clara? I'm sorry. For her, for all of this. You didn't deserve any of it. She hung up before Clara could respond. 10 minutes later, a new video appeared on Sophie's Instagram, time-stamped from the wedding reception. It showed Vivian in a private room, talking to 2 of her bridesmaids. The audio was crystal clear. Did you see her dress? Vivian's voice was sharp, cruel. Damien actually thought bringing his maid would embarrass me, as if I care who he scrapes off the street. She seemed nice, one bridesmaid offered weakly. She's staff. She probably saw this as her big break, chance to land a billionaire. Vivian laughed, the sound cutting. I almost feel sorry for her. She has no idea how disposable she is. The video ended. The fallout was instantaneous. Within an hour, Vivian's statement had been completely undermined. People who'd defended her 5 minutes ago were now calling her out for the hypocrisy. The narrative flipped again, this time decisively in Clara's favor. Clara watched it happen from her couch, numb with exhaustion and something that felt like hollow victory. She'd been vindicated, sure, but at what cost? This had spiraled so far beyond a simple wedding attendance, becoming a full-scale public dissection of everyone involved. Her phone rang. Damien, again. I'm coming over, he said. You don't have to. I'm already in the car. Buzz me up in 5 minutes. He arrived carrying takeout and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Clara's monthly grocery budget. She let him in without argument, too tired to protest. They sat on her worn couch eating Chinese food straight from the containers, not bothering with plates or conversation. The silence was comfortable, grounding. It's over, Damien said finally. Vivian's done, no coming back from that video. I didn't want it to end like this. How did you want it to end? Clara considered the question. I wanted her to realize that cruelty has consequences, that you can't treat people like they're beneath you without it eventually mattering. But I didn't want her destroyed. That's the difference between you and her. Damien set down his container. She would have destroyed you without a second thought. You're worried about being fair to someone who showed you no fairness at all. That doesn't make me better, just different. It makes you better. His voice was firm. Trust me on that. They finished eating in silence. Clara's phone had finally stopped buzzing, the news cycle moving on to analyze the next scandal. Tomorrow there would be more think pieces, more commentary, more strangers with opinions about her life. But tonight, she had mediocre Chinese food and decent company, and the strange sensation of having survived something she never should have had to endure in the first place. What happens now? Clara asked. Damien looked at her, his expression unguarded. Now we figure out what comes next. For both of us. Together? If you'll have me. Clara smiled, surprising herself. Yeah, I think I will. Outside her window, Manhattan hummed with its usual chaos. Inside, two people who'd been thrown together by circumstance and survived by choice sat in comfortable silence, figuring out how to build something real from the wreckage of other people's expectations. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was messier than that, more complicated, more human. But it was theirs. The next morning, Clara woke to silence. No buzzing phone, no flood of notifications, no cameras waiting outside her building. The internet had moved on, chasing fresher scandals, and she was left in the strange vacuum that followed viral fame. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what normal was supposed to look like now. 2 weeks ago, she'd had a routine. Wake up, work, worry about money, sleep, repeat. That life felt impossibly distant, like something that had happened to someone else. Her phone rang at 8. Mrs. Chen. Clara's stomach dropped. She hadn't been to Damien's penthouse since the wedding, hadn't faced the rest of the staff, hadn't dealt with the awkwardness of being the household's most famous employee. Clara? Mrs. Chen's voice was brisk, professional. Mr. Ashford asked me to call. He needs you at the Westchester house today. Emma's asking for you. I can come to the penthouse instead. No need. He'll send a car at 10. A pause. Clara, for what it's worth, we're all glad you stood up for yourself. That sterling woman had it coming. The unexpected support made Clara's throat tight. Thank you. Just don't let all this nonsense go to your head. You still work for a living, same as the rest of us. Clara smiled. Yes, ma'am. The car arrived exactly at 10, and Clara found herself back on the road to Westchester, watching the city give way to suburbs. She'd brought a change of clothes, unsure if she was expected to work or just visit. The distinction felt important somehow, a line she needed to understand. When she arrived, Emma was waiting on the front steps despite the cold, bundled in a purple coat that was slightly too big. She launched herself at Clara the moment the car door opened. You're here! Daddy said you might not come. Clara caught her, lifting the little girl easily. Why wouldn't I come? Because you're famous now. Emma said it matter-of-factly, without judgment. Mrs. Chen showed me a picture on her phone. You were at a party. That's true, but I'm still me. Emma considered this seriously. Good. The dinosaurs missed you. Damien appeared in his doorway, watching them with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. He looked tired, she thought, like he hadn't slept well. Clara, he said, thank you for coming. You make it sound like I had a choice. She set Emma down, and the girl immediately grabbed her hand. You always have a choice. Damien's voice was careful, deliberate. I wanted to make sure you knew that. Emma tugged on Clara's hand. Come see my new puzzle. It has 100 pieces, and I did almost 10 of them by myself. Clara let herself be pulled inside, into the familiar chaos of Emma's presence. The house felt different today. Warmer somehow, less like a workplace and more like somewhere she actually belonged. They spent the morning on the floor of Emma's playroom, working on the puzzle, a cartoon map of the world with animals in improbable places. Emma provided running commentary on each piece, creating elaborate stories about the penguin who wanted to visit the desert and the elephant who was secretly a princess. Damien appeared periodically, ostensibly checking on them, but mostly just watching. Clara caught him studying her several times, his expression thoughtful. Around noon, Emma announced she was hungry and disappeared toward the kitchen with the single-minded determination of a 3-year-old on a mission. Clara started to follow, but Damien stopped her. Let Mrs. Chen handle lunch. I want to talk to you. Clara's stomach tightened. That sounds ominous. It's not, I promise. He gestured toward his office. Just a conversation. The office was all windows and clean lines, overlooking the snow-covered garden. Damien closed the door behind them, and suddenly the space felt too small, too intimate. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble. For what? For all of it. The wedding, the publicity, dragging you into my mess with Vivian. He moved to the window, his back to her. I told myself I was helping you, giving you agency in this situation, but really I was using you to prove a point to my ex-fiancé. I know. Clara's voice was quiet. I knew that from the beginning. Damien turned, surprise flickering across his face. Then why did you agree to go? Because I wanted to prove a point too. Clara moved closer, her honesty feeling dangerous. I've spent my entire life being invisible, being dismissed, being told that people like me don't matter in spaces like that. Going to that wedding, standing next to you, refusing to apologize for existing, it felt like finally mattering, even if it was just for one night. You always mattered, not to people like Vivian Sterling, not to that entire room full of wealth and judgment. Clara's hands twisted together. But I mattered to myself that night. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't ashamed of who I am or where I come from. Damien closed the distance between them in 3 steps. You should never be ashamed, not for a single second. Easy for you to say. You've never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. You're right, I haven't. His voice dropped. But I've had to choose between maintaining appearances and being honest about what I actually need. I've had to perform stability while falling apart after Vivian left. I've had to pretend Emma wasn't affected by her mother abandoning her before she was even born. He paused. Different struggles, Clara, not easier ones. She'd never thought about it that way. She'd assumed wealth-insulated people from real pain made their problems trivial. But looking at Damien now, at the lines around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, she saw someone who'd been performing strength for so long, he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to actually be strong. I'm sorry, Clara said, for assuming your life was easy just because it's expensive. And I'm sorry for assuming you'd be okay with public scrutiny just because you handled Vivian so well. Damien's hand lifted, hovering near her face, but not quite touching. I should have protected you better. I don't need protection, I need partnership. Then that's what you'll get. His hand finally made contact, fingers gentle against her jaw. If you still want it after everything that's happened. Clara's breath caught. This was the moment, she realized, the place where everything could change or stay safely the same. She could step back, maintain professional distance, keep her job and her boundaries intact, or she could lean into this terrifying possibility and see where it led. Emma called from downstairs, her voice cutting through the moment. Clara, lunch is ready, and Mrs. Chen made grilled cheese. Damien's hand dropped. The moment shattered. Clara stepped back, her heart hammering. We should go, she said. Clara, later. We can talk about this later. She moved toward the door, needing distance, needing air. Right now, there's a 3-year-old who thinks grilled cheese is the height of cuisine, and I'm not going to disappoint her. Lunch was chaotic in the way only meals with small children could be. Emma insisted on cutting her sandwich into increasingly smaller pieces until she basically had cheese-flavored confetti. Mrs. Chen watched with resigned amusement, occasionally redirecting the destruction. Clara felt Damien watching her throughout the meal, his attention heavy and consistent. Every time she looked up, his eyes were on her like he was trying to solve an equation he couldn't quite work out. After lunch, Emma demanded a trip to the backyard despite the cold. She wanted to build a snowman, she announced, and needed Clara's help because Daddy always made them too perfect. That's not possible, Damien protested. You can't make a snowman too perfect. Yes, you can, Emma insisted. Clara makes them wonky. They're better. So Clara bundled into a borrowed coat and spent the afternoon building intentionally imperfect snowmen while Damien watched from the kitchen window. Emma added sticks for arms at odd angles and declared each creation a masterpiece. This one's name is Steve, Emma announced, patting the lopsided snow structure. He's a prince. Steve the prince? Clara asked, trying not to laugh. Uh-huh. And he's looking for someone to marry, but everyone's mean to him because he's wonky. Clara's smile faded. She glanced toward the house where Damien was still visible through the window. Being wonky doesn't make someone less valuable, Clara said carefully. Sometimes the wonky ones are the most interesting. That's what I think too. Emma stuck a carrot nose in at an angle that defied physics. There. Perfect. By the time they came inside, Clara's fingers were numb and her cheeks hurt from smiling. Emma was yawning, the afternoon's activities catching up with her. Nap time, Damien announced, scooping up his daughter. I'm not tired, Emma protested, even as her eyes drooped. Just a quick rest. Clara will still be here when you wake up. Emma looked at Clara with sudden worry. Promise? The question hit harder than it should have. Clara crouched down to Emma's level. I promise. I'm not going anywhere. Damien carried Emma upstairs, and Clara was left alone in the living room, surrounded by wealth and comfort that still didn't quite feel like hers to occupy. She wandered to the window, looking out at the wonky snowmen dotting the yard. She adores you, you know. Clara turned to find Damien standing in the doorway. She's easy to adore back. It's more than that. He moved into the room, his expression serious. Emma hasn't bonded with anyone since Vivian left. She's polite with the nannies, obedient with Mrs. Chen, but she doesn't connect. Not until you. I'm just honest with her. Kids can tell when you're performing. Exactly. Damien sat on the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. Everyone performs around Emma. They're careful, walking on eggshells because they know her mother abandoned her. They treat her like she's fragile. He looked up at Clara. You treat her like she's a person. She is a person. I know, but most people forget that. He patted the couch next to him. Sit. Please, we need to finish the conversation we started earlier. Clara's heart rate picked up, but she sat, keeping a careful distance between them. What conversation? The one about what happens next. Between us. Damien turned to face her fully. Clara, I need to be completely honest with you about something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond. Okay. When Vivian left, I told myself I was done with relationships, that I'd focus on Emma, on work, on building a stable life for my daughter. Romance was off the table indefinitely. He paused. And then you showed up to interview for the housekeeper position, and I remember thinking you seemed tired, not just physically tired, but worn down by life in a way I recognized. Clara stiffened. If this is going somewhere insulting, it's not. Let me finish. Damien's voice was gentle. I hired you because you were qualified and professional, but I kept you on because being around you reminded me that not everyone wants something from me. You showed up, did your job, played with Emma, and left. You never asked questions about my money or my connections or my past. You just existed in my space without trying to occupy more of it than you were entitled to. I'm still not sure where this is going. I'm saying that somewhere between the first month and now, you became the person I look forward to seeing. The presence that makes this house feel less empty. The voice I trust when Emma asks questions I don't know how to answer. He took a breath. And I have no idea what to do with that information. Clara sat very still, her mind racing. This was a confession, she realized. Not love, Not yet, but the admission that something had shifted between them into territory neither had anticipated. I don't know either, she said quietly. You're my employer, Damien. There's a power imbalance that makes this complicated in ways I can't just ignore. I know. And I'm not interested in being your rebound from Vivian or your proof that you've moved on. You're not. You never were. Damien shifted closer, his voice earnest. If anything, you're proof that I never really knew what I needed until it showed up in a gray dress asking if I wanted the windows cleaned. Despite everything, Clara smiled. That's a terrible line. I know. I'm out of practice. He smiled back, soft and genuine. Clara, I'm not asking you to quit your job or move in or marry me. I'm just asking if you'd be willing to see where this goes. Slowly, carefully, with complete honesty about what we both need. And if it doesn't work out, then we figure that out too. Like adults. Like partners. He reached for her hand, his touch tentative. But I think it might work out. If we let it. Clara looked at their hands, his larger, softer, unmarked by the kind of work hers did every day. Different hands, different lives, different struggles, but somehow fitting together in a way that felt right. Okay, she said. Okay, let's see where this goes. Slowly, with honesty. She squeezed his hand. But I'm keeping my apartment and my job, and you don't get to make decisions for me about what's best. We're equals in this, or we're nothing. Equals, Damien agreed. I can work with that. They sat there on the couch, hands linked, watching snow fall outside the windows. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no sweeping music, no passionate declarations. Just two people choosing to try something neither was sure how to navigate. Emma appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, rubbing her eyes. I had a dream about Steve the Prince. He found someone who liked wonky things. Did he? Clara asked, fighting a smile. Yeah, and they built a wonky castle and lived there forever. Emma climbed onto the couch between them, completely oblivious to the moment she was interrupting. Can we have hot chocolate? It's 3 p.m, Damien protested. So? Hot chocolate doesn't have a time. Emma looked at Clara for support. Right? She makes a compelling argument, Clara said. Damien sighed in defeat. Fine, hot chocolate. But if you're too wired to sleep tonight, I'm blaming Clara. I accept full responsibility, Clara said solemnly. They moved to the kitchen, Emma chattering about wonky princes and chocolate, and whether snowmen could come inside if they promised to be careful. Damien made hot chocolate that was more cocoa than milk, and Clara added marshmallows that Emma ate before they could melt. It was domestic and simple, and nothing like what Clara had imagined her life would look like. But sitting at that kitchen table, watching Emma distribute marshmallows with careful precision while Damien complained about the mess, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Vivian's publicist just announced she's taking a break from public life to focus on her marriage. Translation. She's hiding until people forget how awful she is. You won. Clara showed the text to Damien. He read it, his expression darkening. I don't want you to think this was about winning, he said quietly. It wasn't, but it's still satisfying to know she's facing consequences. Clara pocketed her phone. Is that petty? Probably, but you're entitled to some pettiness after what she put you through. Emma looked up from her hot chocolate. What's petty? It's when you enjoy someone else being uncomfortable because they were mean to you first, Clara explained. Emma nodded seriously. Like when Sophie pushed me at school, so I told everyone she still sleeps with a nightlight. Damien choked on his hot chocolate. Emma, we talked about this. That's not how we handle conflict. But it worked, Emma pointed out. She stopped pushing. Clara tried not to laugh. Failed. The rest of the afternoon passed in easy comfort. They played games, read books, built increasingly elaborate scenarios with Emma's toy dinosaurs. Damien ordered dinner from a Thai place that delivered all the way to Westchester, and they ate at the kitchen table like a family. Like a family. The thought settled in Clara's chest, warm and terrifying. Around 8, Emma started yawning again. Damien scooped her up for bedtime, and she insisted Clara come too. I want Clara to pick the story, Emma announced. So Clara found herself in Emma's pink bedroom, sitting on the edge of the canopy bed while Damien settled his daughter under the covers. Emma handed Clara a worn book about a rabbit who wanted to fly. Clara read the story, doing different voices for each character. Emma's eyes grew heavier with each page. By the end, she was barely conscious, her stuffed elephant clutched tight. Clara? Emma's voice was sleepy, small. Yeah, sweetie. Are you going to stay? Like forever stay? Clara's throat tightened. She looked at Damien, who was watching them with an expression that made her chest ache. I'm going to stay as long as you want me here, Clara said carefully. Forever then. Emma's eyes closed. Promise? I promise I'll try my very best. It seemed to satisfy her. Within minutes, Emma was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Clara set the book aside and stood carefully, trying not to disturb her. Damien walked her to the door. In the hallway, lit only by the nightlight from Emma's room, he caught her hand. Thank you, he said quietly, for being careful with her, for not making promises you can't keep. I meant what I said. I'll try my best. I know, that's why it matters. He pulled her closer, his other hand settling at her waist. Clara, His phone rang, the sound sharp in the quiet house. Damien cursed under his breath, checking the screen. It's my lawyer. I have to take this. He looked torn between obligation and staying. It's about the custody arrangement with Vivian's family. They've been trying to get visitation rights for Emma, and go, Clara said. Take the call. I'll wait. He disappeared into his office. Clara wandered downstairs, ending up back in the living room. Through the window, she could see the wonky snowmen illuminated by the outdoor lights, crooked and imperfect and somehow perfect anyway. Her phone buzzed. A text from her landlord. Rent's late. Need payment by Monday, or I'm starting eviction proceedings. Reality crashed back in. Claire had been so caught up in viral fame and complicated emotions that she'd forgotten about the practical demands of her actual life. She was 10 days late on rent, her checking account was dangerously low, and her next paycheck wasn't until Friday. She could ask Damien. He'd probably pay her rent without blinking, maybe even offer to set her up somewhere nicer. But the thought made her stomach turn. Taking money from him now, after everything that had happened between them today, felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. Clara was still staring at the text when Damien returned, his expression grim. Bad news? She asked. Vivian's parents want supervised visitation with Emma. They're claiming I'm keeping their granddaughter from them out of spite. He ran a hand through his hair. Which is insane. They've never shown interest in Emma before, but now that Vivian's reputation is damaged, suddenly they want to play involved grandparents. Can they actually get visitation? Maybe. Probably not. But it'll mean lawyers and court dates and Emma being questioned about her home life. Damien's frustration was evident. I just want to protect her from this circus. Clara understood that impulse better than he knew. She'd spent her whole life trying to protect herself from scrutiny, from judgment, from the kind of attention that turned people into spectacles. Now she was watching it happen to a 3-year-old. What can I do? Clara asked. Damien looked at her, something shifting in his expression. Be here. That's all. Just keep being the stable, honest presence in her life that you've always been. I can do that. Even with everything else that's happening, the publicity, the attention, us figuring out whatever this is between us, especially with all of that. Clara moved closer. Emma's the easy part, Damien. She doesn't care about money or status or viral videos. She just wants someone to build wonky snowmen with her. That I can handle. Damien pulled her into a hug, sudden and tight. Clara stiffened for a moment, then relaxed into it, her arms coming up around him. He smelled like expensive cologne and cocoa and something uniquely him. I don't deserve you, he said quietly into her hair. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. He laughed, the sound rough. They stood there in the middle of his living room, holding each other while outside the wonky snowmen stood guard, and inside a little girl slept, dreaming of princes who valued imperfection. Clara's phone buzzed again. Another text from the landlord, more insistent. She felt Damien tense, felt him register the interruption. Everything okay? He asked, pulling back to look at her. Clara hesitated. This was the moment to be honest, to practice the partnership they'd agreed to. But admitting financial struggle to a billionaire felt like admitting failure, like proving she couldn't handle her own life. It's fine, she said, just my landlord being persistent about rent. Damien's expression immediately shifted to concern. Are you behind? A little. It's fine. I'll figure it out. Clara, don't. She stepped back. Please don't offer to fix this with money. I need to handle my own problems. Why? when I could easily, because that's not what partners do. Partners don't rescue each other. They support each other while each person handles their own stuff. Claire's voice was firm. I got myself into this situation by spending money on interview clothes and taking time off work. I'll get myself out. Damien looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Claire's expression stopped him. At least let me give you an advance on your salary. You've been working here for months. You're entitled to... That's different, Clara interrupted. That's earned money, not charity. Fine, an advance. I'll have it transferred tonight. Clara wanted to refuse on principle, but principle didn't pay rent. Thank you. I'll pay it back through payroll deductions. You don't have to... Yes, I do. Clara met his eyes. This is important to me, Damien. I need to know I can stand next to you without being financially dependent on you. Can you understand that? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. That's all I'm asking. The moment settled between them, not entirely comfortable, but honest. Clara checked the time. Nearly 10. She should go home, get some sleep, face Monday, and rent payments and whatever came next. I should call the car service, she said. Stay. Clara blinked. What? Stay tonight. It's late, the drive is long, and Emma will want to see you in the morning. Damien's voice was careful, neutral. Guest room, separate spaces. Just stay. Every practical instinct Clara had screamed that this was a bad idea. Staying overnight crossed too many boundaries, blurred too many lines. But the thought of the long drive back to her empty apartment, of facing her problems alone in the dark, felt suddenly unbearable. Okay, she said. I'll stay. Damien smiled, relief evident. I'll show you to the guest room. There's a bathroom attached, and I'll get you something to sleep in. The guest room was larger than Clara's entire apartment, with a king-size bed and windows overlooking the garden. Damien provided pajamas, his, soft and enormous on her, and left her alone with assurances that she should take whatever she needed from the bathroom. Clara changed, washed her face, and climbed into the most comfortable bed she'd ever experienced. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, the pillows perfectly firm, and despite everything that had happened in the past 2 weeks, she fell asleep within minutes. She woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of small footsteps in the hallway. Before she could orient herself, Emma burst into the room. You stayed! Emma launched herself onto the bed. Daddy said you might leave in the night, but you stayed! Clara caught her, pulling the excited child into a hug. I told you I would. I know, but grown-ups lie sometimes. Mommy lied. Emma said it without apparent pain, just stating a fact. Clara's chest tightened. I'm not your mommy, Emma, but I try really hard not to lie to you. I know. Emma settled against her. That's why I like you better. Damien appeared in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee. Emma, you're not supposed to jump on guests. Clara's not a guest. She's Clara. Emma said it like the distinction was obvious. Damien met Clara's eyes over his daughter's head, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of what they were building here. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue mission, but something real and complicated and worth the effort. Pancakes for breakfast? Damien offered. Only if Clara makes them, Emma insisted. Yours are still bad. My pancakes are fine. They're really not, Clara agreed, climbing out of bed in pajamas 3 sizes too big. The 3 of them headed downstairs, Emma chattering about what they should do today, Damien defending his pancake-making abilities, Clara caught between 2 worlds that were slowly becoming one. Outside, the wonky snowmen were starting to melt in the morning sun. But for now, they still stood, imperfect, tilted, exactly as they should be. 3 weeks passed in a strange rhythm that Clara couldn't quite name. She spent weekdays at Damien's penthouse, maintaining the professional boundaries that kept her employed. Weekends belonged to Westchester, to Emma's demands for wonky snowmen and elaborate tea parties, to quiet dinners with Damien after his daughter fell asleep. They hadn't kissed, hadn't crossed that physical line that would make this undeniably romantic, rather than whatever careful thing they were building. Clara told herself she was being smart, protecting both of them from rushing into something that could collapse spectacularly. But late at night, lying in her own bed, or sometimes in the Westchester guest room, she wondered if caution was just another word for cowardice. The media attention had faded to background noise. Occasional mentions on gossip sites, a few think pieces about class and privilege that used her as an example, but nothing that disrupted daily life. Clara had deleted Instagram entirely, tired of strangers debating her choices in real time. What hadn't faded was the email that arrived on a Tuesday morning while Clara was organizing Damien's home office. The sender was listed as Patricia Ashford, and the subject line read, "We need to talk about my son." Clara stared at it for a full minute before opening it. "Ms. Bennett, I'm sure you're aware of who I am. I'm writing because the situation between you and Damien has come to my attention, and I believe we should meet to discuss it privately. I'll be in Manhattan this Thursday and would appreciate an hour of your time. I'm not your enemy, but I do have my son's best interests at heart. Please call my assistant to arrange a meeting. Patricia Ashford." Clara's hands went cold. Damien's mother. She'd heard about Patricia in passing, old money Boston family, current resident somewhere in Europe, minimal contact with her son after his father's death 5 years ago. Damien never talked about her, which Clara had learned meant the relationship was complicated at best. She should tell Damien immediately. Show him the email, let him handle his own mother. But something stopped her. Patricia had reached out to Clara directly, deliberately excluding her son from the conversation. That meant she wanted something Damien wouldn't willingly give. Clara called the number in the email signature. A crisp assistant answered, and within 3 minutes, Clara had an appointment for Thursday at 2 p.m. at Patricia's hotel suite. She told herself she was gathering information, protecting Damien by understanding what his mother wanted before it became a problem. But walking into the Plaza Hotel Thursday afternoon, Clara knew she was also proving something to herself, that she could handle this world on her own terms, without hiding behind Damien's protection. Patricia Ashford was waiting in a suite that probably cost more per night than Clara's monthly rent. She was in her early 60s, perfectly preserved in the way only wealth could achieve, with Damien's dark eyes and none of his warmth. "Ms. Bennett, thank you for coming." Patricia gestured to a chair. "I hope you don't mind that I went directly to you rather than through Damien. I find these conversations are more productive without emotional interference." Clara sat, her spine straight. "What conversation is that exactly?" "The one about your intentions regarding my son." Patricia poured tea from an actual silver service, the ritual feeling like a weapon. "I've been following the news, of course. The wedding, the publicity, the rather dramatic fallout. You've had quite a month." "I've had a month that was forced on me," Clara corrected. "I didn't ask for any of the attention." "No, but you certainly capitalized on it. The interview, the victim narrative, positioning yourself as the noble working-class heroine." Patricia's smile was sharp. "It's very well done, actually. I can see why Damien is drawn to you." Clara's jaw tightened. "Is there a point to this meeting, Mrs. Ashford?" "There is. I want to understand what you want from my son." Patricia set down her teacup with precise control. "And before you give me some rehearsed answer about respecting him or caring for Emma, understand that I've seen this pattern before. Vivian started out as the perfect supportive partner too. Then she showed her true colors the moment real sacrifice was required. I'm not Vivian. No, you're smarter. Vivian wanted the lifestyle, the status. You're playing the long game, establishing yourself as indispensable, making Damien and Emma dependent on you, waiting for the right moment to leverage that into something permanent." Patricia leaned forward. "So let's skip the pretense. What's your price?" Clara felt something cold settle in her chest. "My price? Everyone has one. How much would it take for you to quietly exit Damien's life? A year's salary? 2? I'm prepared to be generous if it means protecting my son from another disastrous relationship." For a moment, Clara couldn't speak. The sheer audacity of the offer, the assumption that she was for sale, the implication that her presence in Damien's life was inherently damaging, it was breathtaking in its cruelty. "You really think everyone can be bought?" Clara said quietly. "In my experience, yes. The only variable is price." Patricia pulled out a checkbook, actual physical paper in a world of digital transfers. "Name a number, Ms. Bennett. Be realistic, but don't undersell yourself." Clara stood. "I'm not for sale, Mrs. Ashford. Not for any amount you could write on that check. Please." Everyone says that until they see the zeros. Patricia's pen hovered over the paper. "You're what, 30? Working as a housekeeper, living in a studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood, probably drowning in student debt? I'm offering you a way out. Take it." "And leave Damien? Leave Emma?" Clara's voice rose. "Walk away from the first place I felt like I actually mattered in years. Because you've decided I'm not good enough for your son? You're not good enough for him. That's not cruelty. That's fact. Patricia's tone was matter-of-fact, clinical. Damien needs someone from his world, someone who understands the demands of his position. You'll always be playing catch-up, always be the housekeeper pretending to be something more. The words hit like physical blows. Clara felt her carefully constructed confidence crack, felt the old shame rise up. The scholarship kid who never quite fit, the waitress serving people who didn't see her as human, the woman who cleaned toilets for billionaires and pretended that didn't define her worth. "You know what the saddest part is?" Clara said, her voice shaking. "You actually believe what you're saying. You think money and breeding and the right family name are what makes someone worthy of love. But your son already learned that lesson the hard way. Vivian had everything you're talking about, and she still walked away from Emma before she was even born." Patricia's expression flickered. "Vivian was a mistake in judgment. That doesn't mean... It means your metric for measuring people is broken." Clara moved toward the door. "I'm not going to take your money, Mrs. Ashford. I'm not going to walk away from Damien or Emma because you've decided I'm not suitable. And I'm definitely not going to let you make me feel ashamed of who I am or where I come from. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make." Clara opened the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Damien is a better person than you're giving him credit for. He doesn't need someone from his world. He needs someone who sees him as more than his bank account and family name. I do. And no amount of money will make me pretend otherwise." She left before Patricia could respond, her hand shaking as she walked through the plaza lobby. Outside, Manhattan stretched gray and cold, and Clara stood on the sidewalk trying to remember how to breathe. Her phone rang. Damien. Clara stared at the screen, torn between answering and throwing the phone into traffic. She'd just had a confrontation with his mother, accepted no money but also made an enemy. She should tell him. Should be honest about what just happened. She answered. "Hey, where are you? Mrs. Chen said you left early." "I had an errand, personal stuff." The lie tasted bitter. "Oh. Well, I was hoping you could swing by the penthouse. Emma's here for a few hours, and she's asking for you." A pause. "Also, I just want to see you. Is that allowed?" Clara's throat tightened. "Yeah, that's allowed. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up and started walking, her mind racing. She should tell Damien about Patricia. Should give him the full story about his mother trying to buy her off. But the thought of watching his face when he learned his own mother thought so little of Clara and of him felt unbearable. Maybe some things were better left unsaid. Maybe this was something she could handle alone, without dragging him into family drama he'd spent years trying to escape. The penthouse was warm when Clara arrived, filled with the sound of Emma's laughter. She found them in the living room, playing some elaborate game involving stuffed animals and what appeared to be a fort made of couch cushions. "Clara!" Emma launched herself across the room. "Look, we made a castle!" "I see that. Very impressive." Damien looked up from where he was crouched behind a cushion wall, and his smile made Clara's chest ache. "We're under siege from the dragon bears. It's very serious." "Dragon bears?" "They're bears who are also dragons," Emma explained with the patience of someone addressing the deeply ignorant. Obviously. Clara joined the game, pushing thoughts of Patricia and checkbooks and impossible choices to the back of her mind. For the next hour, she was just Clara, playing make-believe with a little girl who didn't care about class differences or social status or whether her father's girlfriend was appropriate. After Emma left with her nanny for a scheduled playdate, Damien and Clara were alone. He poured wine, and they settled on the couch that was still half fort, not bothering to rebuild it properly. "You seem distracted," Damien observed. "Everything okay?" Clara considered lying again, decided against it. "Your mother contacted me." Damien's entire body went rigid. "What?" "She sent an email asking to meet. I went to see her today." Clara took a long drink of wine. "She offered me money to leave you and Emma alone. Apparently I'm not suitable for the Ashford family standards." The silence that followed was profound. Damien set down his glass very carefully, like he was afraid it might shatter. "She did what?" "Offered to pay me off. She had an actual checkbook, Damien, physical paper." Clara laughed without humor. "I said no, obviously, but she made it very clear that she thinks I'm using you, that I'm playing some long con to trap a billionaire. I'm going to kill her." Damien stood, pacing. "I'm actually going to kill my own mother. Please don't. The publicity would be terrible." "This isn't funny, Clara. She had no right." He stopped, turning to face her. What exactly did she say to you? Clara recounted the conversation as accurately as she could, watching Damien's expression darken with each detail. When she finished, he was staring at her with something between horror and admiration. You told her no, he said. Of course I told her no. Did you think I'd take the money and disappear? No, but I also know my mother can be very persuasive when she wants something. Damien crossed back to her, taking her hands. Clara, I'm so sorry. I should have warned you she might do something like this. She pulled the same thing with Vivian, actually, but Vivian took it as validation, proof she was important enough to bribe. I'm not Vivian. I know. That's why you're still here. He lifted one of her hands to his lips, the gesture sending heat through Clara's entire body. Thank you for telling me, and for standing your ground. Though I wish you'd called me from the plaza so I could have told my mother exactly where she could put her checkbook. Clara smiled despite herself. I handled it. You did more than handle it. You defended us. Both of us. Damien's grip tightened. Clara, I need you to understand something. My mother's opinion doesn't matter. It hasn't mattered since I was 18 and she told me business school was more important than my father's funeral. What matters is what we're building here. You, me, Emma. That's real. Everything else is noise. Your mother doesn't think it's real. My mother thinks money and breeding are the only things that matter. She's been wrong about everything important in her life. Why would she be right about this? Clara wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that what they had could survive the weight of outside judgment and family disapproval, but Patricia's words had burrowed under her skin, finding the insecurities Clara thought she'd overcome. What if she's right, though? Clara asked quietly. Not about me using you, but about me not being enough. What if Emma grows up and realizes her father's girlfriend used to clean his toilet? What if your business associates can't take you seriously because I don't know which fork to use at fancy dinners? Damien cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. First, you've never cleaned my toilet. That's Mrs. Chen's domain. Second, I don't care which fork you use. Third, Emma adores you specifically because you're real with her. And fourth, any business associate who judges me based on who I'm with is someone I don't want to work with anyway. That's easy to say when you have enough money to not care about consequences. You're right. It is easy for me. Damien's voice softened. But Clara, you walked into Vivian Sterling's wedding wearing borrowed jewelry and stood your ground in front of 400 people who wanted to see you fail. You gave an interview knowing the internet would tear you apart and did it anyway. You just told my mother, one of the most intimidating women in Manhattan social circles, to take her money and leave. You've never taken the easy route. Why would you start now? Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Because I'm tired. I'm tired of fighting for respect, for space, for the right to exist in places people think I don't belong. And I'm scared that one day you'll wake up and realize your mother was right, that I'm just the housekeeper you felt sorry for. Hey! Damien pulled her close and Clara let herself collapse against him. You're not the housekeeper I felt sorry for. You're the woman who makes Emma laugh, the person who calls me out when I'm being ridiculous. The only voice in my life that isn't trying to sell me something or manage me or use me for connections. He pressed his lips to her forehead. You're Clara, and that's more than enough. They stayed like that for a long time, Clara crying quietly while Damien held her, until the tears ran out and only exhaustion remained. I should go, Clara said finally, pulling back. It's late, and I have work tomorrow. Stay tonight, please. Damien's voice was soft. Not in the guest room. Here, with me. Clara's breath caught. Damien, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just want you close. Want to know you're okay. His thumb brushed across her cheek, catching a remaining tear. Please. Clara should say no. Should maintain boundaries, keep some professional distance. But she was so tired of being alone, of carrying everything by herself. Okay, she whispered. They moved to his bedroom, a space Clara had cleaned dozens of times but never occupied. Damien gave her clothes to sleep in, disappeared to give her privacy to change. When he returned, they climbed into bed from opposite sides, the space between them feeling both vast and non-existent. Come here, Damien said, holding out his arm. Clara shifted closer, fitting herself against him. His arm came around her, solid and warm, and for the first time since Patricia's meeting, she felt safe. I'm falling in love with you, Damien said into the darkness. I know that's terrible timing. I know we agreed to take things slow. But my mother offering you money to leave made me realize that I can't lose you. I won't survive it. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She should say it back. Should tell him she was falling too, that this terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. But the words stuck in her throat, held back by fear and Patricia's voice, and the lifetime of being told she wasn't enough. You don't have to say anything, Damien continued. I just needed you to know. Whatever happens next, however we figure this out, you should know that you matter. To me, to Emma. You're not disposable, Clara. You're essential. Clara pressed her face against his chest, feeling tears threaten again. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of believing you. Of trusting this is real, and not just some fantasy that falls apart when reality hits. Then we'll take it one day at a time, one choice at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Damien's hand moved through her hair, gentle and soothing. Tomorrow, you wake up here or in your apartment, whatever feels right. You keep working for me or find another job, whatever makes you feel independent. You tell me you love me or tell me you need more time, whatever is honest. I'm not going anywhere, Clara. You set the pace. Something in Clara's chest loosened. She lifted her head, finding his face in the dim light from the windows. What if I don't know what pace I need? Then we figure it out together. Damien's smile was soft. That's what partners do, right? Clara kissed him. It was impulsive, desperate, born from emotion rather than strategy. Damien went still for half a second, then kissed her back, his hand cradling her face like she was something precious. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Clara rested her forehead against his. I'm falling too, she whispered, in case that wasn't clear. Damien laughed, the sound warm and relieved. It was moderately clear. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in weeks, Clara didn't dream about weddings or cameras or being judged by strangers. She just slept, peaceful and whole. The next morning brought complications. Clara woke to find herself in Damien's bed, sunlight streaming through windows that faced Central Park, and the sudden realization that she had no clean clothes and no plan for how to navigate this at work. Damien was already awake, watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. Good morning. Morning. Clara sat up, suddenly self-conscious. I should probably stay for breakfast. Mrs. Chen won't be in until 9. We have time. They ate pancakes that Damien attempted and Clara fixed, coffee that was too strong, and conversation that carefully avoided the previous night's confessions. It felt domestic and right and terrifying. At 8:30, Clara's phone rang. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, then remembered that avoiding calls was how problems multiplied. Hello, Ms. Bennett? This is Jennifer Walsh from the New York Times. I'm working on a follow-up piece about wealth disparity and social mobility, and I'd love to interview you about your experiences. Would you have time this week to chat? Clara's stomach sank. I already did an interview. I'm not really looking to... I understand, but your story has resonated with our readers in unexpected ways. We've received hundreds of emails from people in similar positions, working-class individuals navigating wealthy spaces, feeling invisible. Your voice matters to them. Clara looked at Damien, who was watching her with concern. She covered the phone. It's the Times. They want another interview. Tell them no, Damien said immediately. You don't owe anyone more of your story. But Clara was thinking about Patricia's checkbook, about being told she wasn't enough, about all the other women in service positions who were dismissed daily by people like Vivian Sterling. I'll do it, Clara said into the phone, but on my terms. No photos, no personal details about Damien or Emma, just my experience. They scheduled it for the following Tuesday. When Clara hung up, Damien was frowning. You don't have to keep doing this, he said. You don't have to be a spokesperson for an entire class of people. I know, but maybe I want to be. Clara set down her phone. Your mother thinks I should be ashamed of cleaning houses for a living. Vivian used my job as a weapon. How many other people are being treated that way right now and nobody's calling it out? So you're going to call it out. Someone should. Clara met his eyes. I'm tired of being quiet about this, Damien. I'm tired of pretending it doesn't matter that people treat service workers like we're invisible unless we're useful. If I can change that conversation even a little, isn't that worth the discomfort? Damien studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I support you. Completely. Whatever you need. The interview with the Times happened in Clara's apartment, at her insistence. She wanted Jennifer Walsh to see where she actually lived, to understand the gap between her world and Damien's. The resulting piece was thoughtful and nuanced, exploring not just Clara's story, but the larger structures that made it exceptional for a housekeeper to be treated with basic dignity. The response was overwhelming. Clara's social media, which she'd reluctantly reactivated, flooded with messages from other domestic workers, sharing their own stories of dismissal and disrespect. Some were grateful someone was speaking up. Others were angry she was getting attention for something they experienced daily without recognition. Clara read every message, the weight of representation settling heavy on her shoulders. She hadn't asked to be a symbol, but here she was, carrying the expectations of thousands of people who saw themselves in her story. 2 weeks after the Times piece published, Damien came home from a business dinner looking troubled. Clara was at the penthouse, having unofficially moved in after spending more nights there than at her own apartment. "We need to talk," he said, and Clara's heart sank. They sat in the living room, the same space where they'd built couch forts with Emma, and Damien looked more serious than she'd ever seen him. "My board had concerns today," he said carefully, "about the publicity surrounding us, about whether my personal life is affecting the company's image." "Are they asking you to end things?" Clara's voice came out flat. "No, but they're suggesting we might want to keep a lower profile. Stop doing interviews, let the attention die down." He paused. One of them actually used the phrase "unfortunate distraction." Clara laughed bitterly. "I'm an unfortunate distraction. That's great." Clara, "No, they're right. Your billionaire CEO boyfriend probably doesn't need his housekeeper girlfriend making waves about class inequality. Bad for business. That's not what I'm saying." Damien moved closer. "I don't care what the board thinks. I care what you think. Is this the attention, the pressure, being a public figure when you never wanted to be? Is it worth it to you?" Clara thought about Patricia's offer, about Vivian's cruelty, about the hundreds of messages from people who finally felt seen because someone had called out the system that made them invisible. "Yeah," she said quietly, "it's worth it. Then we keep going, together." Damien took her hand. "But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If it becomes too much, if the scrutiny or the pressure or the constant judgment starts destroying you, you'll tell me. We'll find another way." His grip tightened. "I won't watch you sacrifice yourself to prove a point, Clara. Not even a point I agree with." "I promise," Clara said. 3 months later, Clara stood in the bathroom of Damien's Westchester house, staring at a pregnancy test that showed 2 very clear lines. This wasn't supposed to happen. They'd been careful, mostly, except for a few times when emotion overtook planning. Clara had told herself it was fine, that the timing was wrong, that her body wouldn't betray her like this. But here she was, pregnant at 30, unmarried, technically still employed as Damien's housekeeper despite spending most of her time living in his homes. She heard Emma's voice downstairs, chattering about something. Heard Damien respond with the patient tone he used when his daughter was being particularly elaborate in her storytelling. Clara looked at herself in the mirror, still her, still Clara, but now carrying the weight of a choice that would change everything. She found Damien in the kitchen, making lunch. Emma was at the table, coloring with intense focus. "Can we talk?" Clara asked. "Privately?" Damien looked up, immediately registering something in her tone. "Emma, sweetie, can you go play in your room for a bit?" "But I'm coloring?" "Take your markers with you. I'll call you when lunch is ready." Emma gathered her supplies with dramatic sighing, and once she was gone, Damien turned to Clara with concern. "What's wrong?" Clara pulled the pregnancy test from her pocket, setting it on the counter between them. "I'm pregnant." Damien stared at the test for a long moment. His expression was completely unreadable. Clara felt panic rising in her chest, old fears about being trapped or abandoned, about history repeating itself with her becoming the woman left alone with a baby. Then Damien's face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. "You're pregnant," he repeated. "Yeah, I know we didn't plan this, and the timing is terrible with everything going on, and your board will probably have opinions." Damien kissed her, cutting off the spiral of anxiety. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "I love you," he said. "I love Emma, and I already love this baby. Everything else we figure out together." Clara felt tears spilling over. "You're not upset?" "Upset? Clara, this is—" He laughed, pulling her close. This is terrifying and perfect, and I have no idea how we're going to handle it, but I'm not upset. Are you? Clara thought about it honestly. Was she scared? Yes. Overwhelmed? Absolutely. But underneath all that was something else, a fierce, protective joy that surprised her with its intensity. No, she said. I'm not upset. They told Emma that afternoon. She processed the information with the seriousness of a child who understood she was about to lose only child status. Will the baby share my toys? She asked. Eventually, Damien said, but not for a while. Will it be wonky? Clara choked on a laugh. Probably, knowing our luck. Emma considered this, then nodded. Okay, but I get to pick the middle name. Absolutely not, Damien said immediately. Why not? Because you'll name it something like Dinosaur or Sparkle Princess. Those are good names, Emma protested. They spent the rest of the afternoon negotiating middle name options, and for the first time since seeing those two lines, Clara felt something like peace. The pregnancy news leaked 3 weeks later, despite their best efforts at privacy. Clara's first trimester was documented by strangers who photographed her at the grocery store and analyzed whether she was showing yet. The commentary was brutal and predictable. Half the internet was thrilled. The other half was convinced she'd trapped Damien with a baby. Patricia Ashford sent a letter, not an email this time. Actual stationery, delivered by courier. It was short. I assume congratulations are in order, though I maintain my concerns about this relationship. The child will be my grandchild regardless of my feelings about its mother. I expect to be involved. Clara read it 3 times, trying to decide if it was an olive branch or a threat. Probably both. Damien's response was to call his mother and have a conversation Clara could hear from the next room, involving words like boundaries and respect, and if you ever speak about Clara like that again, you'll never meet your grandchild. The conversation ended with Patricia agreeing to be civil in exchange for limited visitation rights. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The pregnancy was difficult. Clara dealt with morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made work impossible, and the constant scrutiny of strangers who felt entitled to comment on her body. She officially quit as Damien's housekeeper at 5 months, unable to keep up the pretense that she was an employee rather than his partner. The media had a field day with that too. Damien proposed on a random Tuesday evening when Clara was 7 months pregnant, wearing his sweatpants and eating ice cream straight from the container. There was no grand gesture, no elaborate setup. Just him, on his knees in their living room, holding a ring that was beautiful but not ostentatious. Marry me, he said, not because of the baby, not because of what anyone thinks, just because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life building wonky snowmen and eating terrible pizza and fighting about pancake techniques. Clara, crying and laughing and hormonal, said yes. They married quietly at City Hall 2 weeks later, with Emma as their only witness. She wore a purple dress and took her ring-bearer duties very seriously, presenting them with plastic rings from a toy set because, as she informed them, real rings are too slippery. The baby came in early August, a girl they named Sarah. Emma had campaigned hard for the middle name Dinosaur, but they compromised on Grace, not after anyone, just because it felt right. Sarah was tiny and perfect, and screamed like she was personally offended by existence. Clara loved her with an intensity that was almost frightening. Vivian sent a gift, an expensive baby blanket and a card that said simply, "Congratulations." Clara threw away the blanket but kept the card, proof that even Vivian Sterling could manage basic decency when forced. Patricia visited when Sarah was 2 weeks old, appearing at the door with presents and an expression that suggested she was trying very hard to be pleasant. She held her granddaughter with surprising gentleness and made no comments about Clara's appearance or the state of the house. Progress, Clara thought. Slow and painful, but progress. The first year of Sarah's life was chaos. Clara learned to function on 3 hours of sleep, to negotiate between Emma's needs and the baby's demands, to exist in the strange space between Billionaire's wife and former housekeeper. The media eventually lost interest when they failed to divorce or implode publicly, moving on to fresher scandals. Clara started a foundation quietly, using some of the wealth that still made her uncomfortable. It provided grants to domestic workers pursuing education, helping them access the opportunities Clara had stumbled into through extraordinary circumstances rather than systemic change. It felt like the best use of her accidental platform, not speaking for people, but creating paths for them to speak for themselves. Damien supported it completely, offering connections and funding and expertise, but he let Clara run it, understanding that she needed something that was entirely hers. Emma started kindergarten and told everyone her mom used to clean houses, with the same pride other kids reported their parents were doctors or lawyers. She didn't understand yet why that made some adults uncomfortable, why Clara was both celebrated and dismissed as a curiosity. One evening, when Sarah was 18 months old and Emma was 6, they all sat in the living room, the same one where Clara had once cleaned and now lived. Emma was reading to Sarah with elaborate dramatic flair. Damien was working on his laptop, occasionally looking up to smile at his daughters. Clara watched them, her family, and thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago. The one who couldn't make rent, who felt invisible, who never imagined she'd belong in a space like this. She hadn't changed completely. She still worried about money sometimes, even though she didn't need to. Still felt like an imposter at charity galas, where people who'd once dismissed her now treated her as Damien Ashford's wife. Still remembered what it felt like to be measured and found wanting. But she'd learned something Vivian Sterling never understood. Worth wasn't about where you came from, or who you married, or whether you could name drop the right connections. Worth was about showing up honestly, treating people with dignity, refusing to accept systems designed to make you feel small. Clara had walked into Vivian's wedding as a housekeeper and left as herself. That was the real victory. Not changing to fit their world, but making space for her world to exist alongside it. Mama? Emma looked up from her book. Can we build a snowman tomorrow? It snowed last night. Clara smiled. Only if we make it wonky. Obviously, Emma said, with all the certainty of a 6-year-old who'd learned that imperfection could be its own kind of perfect. Outside, Manhattan glittered with lights and money and endless ambition. Inside, a family that shouldn't exist by traditional standards, a billionaire, a former housekeeper, and their children, proved that sometimes the best stories were the ones nobody planned. Clara had spent her life being told she didn't belong. She'd learned the hard way that belonging wasn't something anyone could give or take away. It was something you claimed for yourself, one honest choice at a time. She'd claimed it, and no amount of judgment, cruelty, or social pressure would make her give it back. The wonky snowmen would melt eventually, but that was fine. They'd just build new ones, imperfect and honest, exactly as they should be.